And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the concluding round of the UKSimRacing Community's GT3 League Season 9, as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. And today marks round 8 of 8 as we made our way to Florida, the Sunshine State in the United States of America, for the one and only Sebring International Raceway. This circuit, of course, with infamous tarmac, or should we say combination of concrete slabs and asphalt road surface, one that's highly bumpy and normally seen as a test of a car's endurance before teams compete in the annual 24 Hours of Le Mans. Well, as our drivers make their way around Sebring today, it is going to be a test of endurance for our drivers. It's our second and final endurance race of the season, and of course it is our season finale, so it makes it 2 for 2 when it comes to being the ultimate test of our drivers' abilities as we get ready to go racing today. As we can see the sun gradually setting, our drivers in the background there in the final practice session. Well, we're not too far away from what is expected to be an absolute thriller, and indeed we've got 2 championships still to wrap up. We wrapped up, of course, last time out the Elite Drivers Championship and also the AM Class Drivers Championship, but we've still got the Pro Championship and the Teams Championship to conclude, and we'll take you through the permutations of those very shortly and exactly how they could play out. But as we get ready to go racing, you're tuning in live by the official UKSimRacing YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, then we definitely recommend you do so to stay up to date with all the latest UKSimRacing broadcasts. And well, if you are tuning in, hello and welcome to you. Hope you're all doing well this fine Sunday evening on the 5th of March 2023. And as we get ready to go racing, all of your racing action today is being brought to you live by myself. Allow me to introduce myself. My name's Paul TX11 Walsh, also known as Britain Spit, depending on what minute you follow me on, and I'll be bringing you all your racing action for the remainder of this season. And speaking of the season, as we take a look back at all the rounds we've covered, of course 7 weeks of racing action are led up to this, and we started off all the way back on the 8th of January in the United Kingdom at Silverstone in our opening sprint. From there we made our way across the Atlantic Ocean for the first time to the United States of America, albeit to Daytona road course, also in Florida, and then we saw on the 15th of January an absolute thriller of a race under the night lights before we made our way back to continental Europe for the Monza Sprint. There at the Grand Prix circuit was dominated by one name, Håkon, and in round number 3 on the 22nd of January, it was one McLaren in the form of the Indian Motorsport machine that never seemed to be catchable. But as we made our way for round number 4 at Magny-Cours, or the Circuit de Nevers Magny-Cours in France, in our first endurance race round of the season, on the 29th of January, as I turned a year older on that day, we also got to see a turning point in the Pro Class Championship, with John Eddowes picking up a fantastic win on strategy and therefore taking the lead in the Pro Class. After that, we had a week's break before returning for round number 5 on the 12th of February in Germany at the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit, and then we saw plenty of battling action throughout the classes before we made our way down under to Bathurst on Mount Panorama on the 19th of February, and there we saw a number of drivers come a cropper at the mountain, but those who survived fighted on strong, and indeed Aaron McGregor there with a good result made sure he was well on course to wrap up the AM Championship in round number 7. Speaking of which, last time out we made our way to Sao Paulo, Brazil for the Interlagos circuit, and on the South American continent there we saw the conclusion of the Elite and AM Class Championships, with Håkon Grebstad being crowned champion in the Elite class and Aaron McGregor being crowned champion in the AM class on the 26th of February. But today it is the 5th of March and we are here at Sebring for our final endurance race round. Now, going into this round, let's give you a quick recap of the championships. We start off with the Elite class, of course, after 7 of 8 rounds, and we can see here with an advantage of what is their 17 points, Håkon Grebstad has wrapped up the championship with a round to spare, given the fact the only drop score that applies tonight is the endurance race round drop score, whereby the best score of either round 4 or round 8 will be taken forward, and given the delta between the two drivers is only 2 points in that regard, it means that Håkon Grebstad is your de facto champion. Meanwhile, the battle for P3 is on, both on 88 points there. Joe Newman for Sim Racing Red and Daniel Lee will have it go down to the wire tonight, with both drivers looking to improve considerably, albeit Joe Newman having the greater potential pool of 16 points to improve by compared to Daniel Lee's 12. But really right now it's looking for the second runner-up spot after Daniel Thomas in the battle for P3. But let's turn our attention now to one of the big championships that truly matters here in terms of who is going to be our ultimate champion in the Pro class. And we can see going into tonight, John Eddowes Coolest and Tiki SimSport Kimi holds a 7-point advantage over UKSimRacing's Peter Cox. The delta between the two of them of 7 points means that the following permutations apply, and stay with us folks, we'll try and keep it as simple as possible. For John Eddowes to win today, given the fact he picked 40 points up at Magny-Cours out of a potential of 42, he will need to prevent Peter Cox by taking the championship crown by simply taking the win, or alternatively taking second place and scoring both bonus points. Or what he can also do is take second place and secure 1 bonus point, and therefore he will beat Peter Cox should Peter Cox win the race and take a bonus point based on number of wins, as Eddowes will have 3 to Peter Cox's 2. Meanwhile, for Peter Cox to win the championship today and overhaul that 7-point deficit, firstly he must either finish second and score at least 1 bonus point, or alternatively he must win the race as a minimum. But then, given the permutations that we just explained, every bonus point will matter to Peter Cox, and therefore it is near perfection today for the UKSimRacing driver that is needed for him to be able to secure the championship crown. Meanwhile, outside of the top 2, Alex Gaines there in P3 on 79 points. We're looking to hold on to P3 in the privateer outfit there by 2 points over Ignium Motorsport Sparks, Edward Knight. With Nathan J. Scott not too far behind as well, it could be any one of the 3 who secures that second runner-up spot in the hunt for P3, with Chris Eddersford a further 15 points behind, and given his points achievements at Magny-Cours, it may not be a gap that he's able to overhaul. But as we then come on to the AM class, to give you a quick reminder, Aaron McGregor, your champion, with an advantage there of 29 points following the conclusion of round number 7. And while we can see there, most of the drivers behind him could definitely improve based on results at Magny-Cours, nobody is able to improve by a theoretical gap of 29 points to be able to sweep the crown away from Aaron McGregor. So therefore the pressure is off of McGregor, the privateer who's taken the championship crown, but indeed the pressure is on for Casper Bruckner for Old Dudes in Cars, and the 2 privateer drivers of Adrian Kukulis and Darren Sharples, with all 3 drivers there having the potential to improve and seal the runner-up spot. And the one right now who's in the ultimate driving seat for that, Darren Sharples, who only accrued 12 points at Magny-Cours. That means he theoretically has a 30-point pool in which he's able to improve tonight, and that could take him up to a grand total of 110 points if it all works out for him. But of course in the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo, it's simpler said than done, as we've seen all season. Sharples really has had the ultimate challenge compared to his peers. Meanwhile, Kukulis on 36 points there for round number 4. He'll have the least margin for improvement, and he'll need a win as a minimum if he wants to overhaul Casper Bruckner come the end of today. And Bruckner as well, with 28 points secured at Magny-Cours, has quite an array of improvement scale there, and therefore it'll be Bruckner and Sharples who could really be the biggest threats, and Kukulis there will really need things to swing his way if he wants to try and bring home that P2 slot. Also, do not forget Michael Warrington there. Should things go adversely, Michael Warrington, if he picked up a win and his rivals ended up retiring or securing very low sets of points, he could also be your runner-up given everything come the end of today. As we then come onto the team standings, we can see here at the top at the moment on 201 points with an advantage of 16 points. UKSimRacing over ProTech Motorsport lead the way, but with ProTech Motorsport there not picking up any points last time out, they'll be looking to invest everything into the racing at Magny-Cours. But with UKSimRacing having a greater potential to improve by a further 6 points, we do believe this is going to go the way of UKSimRacing unless something exceptional occurs here. But we'll have to wait and see. And Tiki SimSport Kimi in the meantime also on the heels of ProTech Motorsport there in a battle for the top 3 that is going to go down to the wire. But speaking of our circuit, then we come from our standings and talk a little bit about the Sebring International Raceway. And of course our drivers will be racing at the full international layout located near the city of Sebring in Highlands County of Florida in the United States of America. As we can see from the circuit map here provided by iRacing.com, thank you to them for their wonderful circuit maps, indeed their brilliant simulator. This is a circuit with 17 corners that will put our drivers through their ultimate paces. Based on the old Hendricks Army Air Base where B-17 pilots were trained during the Second World War, no longer an air base for military use, and in fact used a bit of a runway which is used for commercial use these days. We'll see our drivers tackle a number of road surfaces where they have the combination of asphalt for the first half of the lap and then old concrete slabs for the second half of the lap. Indeed, this is going to be a circuit that's very rough on the machine, and if you're able to do 12 hours around here at Sebring, and of course the infamous 12 hours of Sebring that occurs every year before the 24 hours of Le Mans, it's rumoured that you're able to compete in the 24 hours of Le Mans, because this circuit, despite the fact it's typically run at half the duration of the 24 hours of Le Mans, is seen to put cars through double the paces. But as our drivers make their way across the start-finish line, heading to turn number 1 and charge through the long left-hander, they'll balance the throttle keenly before coming through the Kinker 2 and breaking into turn 3. We'll see the circuit narrow very tightly through turns 3 through to 5, but as they emerge from turn 5, they charge through the big bend at turn 6 flat out before heading into the heavy braking zone of the hairpin at turn 7. There we'll see plenty of overtaking opportunities, but those who are able to steer clear of overtaking, they'll make the way up towards turn number 10, heading through the Fangio complex of turns 8 and 9 before heading onto the brakes into Cunningham at turn 10. The sharp right-angled right handle will then be followed up by Collier corner at turn 11, where it's all about balance of the throttle and hitting a nice late apex before they head up into Tower corner at turn 13, through the King of 12 along the way. As they come through the right-hander in front of the air traffic control tower, they'll make the way down towards Le Mans corner via Bishop, where we'll see the average apex speed continue to rise before they brake hard into turn 15 and then come into Le Mans corner with the aim of having the ultimate exit there to charge down the back straight of Auburn Straight to wrap up the lap via Sunset Bend. Named after the fact when the sun is setting, it'll be shining in the eyes of our drivers as they come through the right-hand return at number 17. They're held to the start finish straight and do it all again for what is going to be plenty of minutes of racing action today. And as we look to our rule set, of course, because we can't go racing without rules, we can see that in terms of car setups, our drivers are allowed to bring any setup they so desire, but our car fuel loads have been restricted to 45% for all racing this series, including this season finale. In terms of qualifying, a lone qualifying format shall be used, where all of our drivers will take to the circuit by their lone serve, and indeed they'll have 4 laps or 15 minutes, whichever expires first, to set their best possible time. So that's 1 out lap and then 4 flying laps. And in terms of the endurance race, the race shall commence via double file rolling start, as is the tradition of this series, with there being no mandatory pit stop requirements. Now, what does that mean in practice, I hear you ask? Well, that means that our drivers will be expected to pit at some point in the race, but there is no mandatory requirement to do, say, 2 pit stops or 3 pit stops. And as we saw at Magny-Court, it really was the balance of a 2-stop, a very conservative 2-stop, versus the aggressive 3-stop, where in some classes, the 3-stop was the go-to strategy. In others, meanwhile, it was the 2-stop that prevailed, and particularly Håkon Grebstad's 2-stop in the elite class being the ultimate example of how fuel saving worked to a treat. But on top of that, there are no fast repairs available. That means that if our drivers pick up damage, they either need to soldier on, alternatively they may need to be towed to the pits before coming for that repair work, and the driver should receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 25 or more instant points. But that's enough rules and regulation. I know what you're all here for, and as we head back to our live pictures, let's take you through our schedule for tonight. Times in Greenwich Mean Time, that's GMT, or Universal Coordinated Time UTC, as follows. With just under 3 minutes time, we'll be heading into the qualifying session, and that'll be 15 minutes in duration. In fact, just over 3 minutes time, we should correct ourselves there. 15 minutes in duration, as we previously said. We'll see our drivers take to the circuit on their lone serve before we then head straight to the grid for our one and only endurance race today. 90 minutes in duration to wrap up the season. Indeed, that final checker flag will be the curtain call for the series, or for this season we should say. We've got plenty more races to come in future seasons, and more of that at the end of today's broadcast. But with an ambient temperature currently at 23 degrees centigrade and a track temperature that's gradually rising, it's a nice day today here at Sebring, and for our drivers it means that it's not too hot, it's not too cold either, and therefore they'll be able to find the grip, and we should see the very best from our drivers throughout the racing action that occurs over the 90 minutes. But as our drivers get ready to go, of course, we look to our Pro Championship battlers, and here is John Eddowes in the TT Supersport Kimmy BMW M4 GT3 as he makes his way on around here and rolling his way out of what is their turn number 5 and heading down towards, in fact that's not turn number 5 we should say, making his way on around here and up towards turn number 13. Those camera angles are always a little bit deceptive, of course, but Eddowes knowing that today he needs to deprive Peter Cox of all the points he can. It is really up to Peter Cox to control his destiny, and for Eddowes it's all about making sure that he stays one step ahead of Cox. Meanwhile, and looking to be a bit of a difficult practice session right now, but then again Cox may not be investing any energy right now. He may be saving it all up for going into qualifying in the race, knowing that the stakes are ever so high. The number 68 UKSimRacing driver in his own BMW M4, of course, well, right now he knows that he has to finish second as a minimum and take as many bonus points as possible. First really is the ultimate target here, but these practice tyres right now seem to be looming with some rather foreboding signs. Peter Cox then being the sliced of our pros compared to Eddowes, who's the fastest, but we don't know if those laps are being set on low fuel, qualifying setups, or something else in between. But as Nathan Scott makes his way on around here, of course, it's not just going to be about those two in the Pro Championship. We've got plenty of other drivers who are all looking to end their season campaigns on a high, and well, Nathan Scott, one of many in the Pro class, Dion Wren, another, who've all been coming alive over the last couple of rounds, and they could all potentially play a factor today and potentially scupper the chances for Eddowes or Cox, albeit they won't be intended to, but they'll want their victory where they can. It's not just about the pro class, of course. Indeed, with just over a minute to go before we head into the qualifying session, Daniel Lee, one of the big names in the elite class here today, who'll be looking to try and end his season with that P3 finish versus Joe Newman. And with Newman not in attendance today, this could really work out for Daniel Lee should he bring the car on home in a comfortable finish. It will be he'll need to improve on that Magnet Core performance, and he'll have that on his mind as he makes his way into turn number 5. But the one thing we can count on with Daniel Lee in the Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo, if you're looking for somebody who can pull off strategy, he is the man with that ultimate fuel saving strategy at Magnet Core, seeing him jump 8 places overall in the end on strategy. And can he pull off another magical strategic maneuver today? Jacko Taylor, meanwhile, the Tiki SimSport car Marte driver, heading all the way down up towards that turn at number 17 at sunset, and with 30 seconds left in this practice session, looking very fast at the moment in the elite class in this practice session. Only 9 thousandths off the fastest time set by Daniel Lee. And as all our drivers have an itch to scratch here, we of course also do have our AMs who get themselves set, including Jack Bullen here for Tiki SimSport Kimi, and we also have Michael Warrington here for Tiki SimSport car Marte, and they're all set right now, albeit not the fastest times out there, but there's still time available. But whilst we do have a minute available, ladies and gentlemen, did you know if you've been a long time follower of UK Sim Racing, if you've ever wondered the question of how you can potentially give back to UK Sim Racing, there is a way to do so via our affiliates. For UK Sim Racing is affiliated with multiple sim racing and real world motorsport companies, including Swello Meta Sim Racing Coaching, Race Anywhere and Demon Tweaks. And if you do head to our website, that's uksimracing.co.uk today, and you'll see it pop up on the screen right now, our newly redesigned website, there will be in the near future a page you can go to which shows a list of all of our affiliates. But whilst that page is not available, there is a link in the top right corner, as you can see there, to our Discord, which you need to join if you ever want to compete in any of our series. And we're a very sociable bunch at UK Sim Racing, so why not join our Discord if you want to chat to people who are like-minded about sim racing, real world motorsport. You'll be amazed what other hobbies we get up to. Indeed, some of us have some very unique hobbies, but at the same time, everything in between there. And if you do go to our Discord, some of our affiliates provide discount codes which are available in the UK Sim Racing Discord. And well, if you use those discount codes, well, it means for you as the consumer that you get a discount on your purchase, and for us at UK Sim Racing, we receive a kickback. But because we are a non-profit organisation, all of our affiliate earnings shall be invested back into the community to fund future series, including the upcoming seasons of the GT3 League, the Porsche Cup, and we've got plenty more planned for 2023 and onwards. So do remember, a little purchase can go a long way in supporting UK Sim Racing. But I can tell you right now, one thing that is going to go a huge way tonight to success, well, it is a strong qualifying lap. Because the thing about the Sebring circuit, whilst it does present a good number of overtaking opportunities, when you're looking at endurance race, you want to qualify well. Because over the 90 minutes, you can make and lose a lot of ground over the time. And the one thing that our drivers will have on their minds immediately is the fact that if they do end up qualifying below where they're expected to qualify, then they will have to make it an uphill battle all the way through the race. And therefore, they may not be able to optimise their strategies as much as potentially they would like to do so. Indeed, if you're focusing on potentially a two-stop strategy, it requires you to run on a very safe amount of fuel usage from lap to lap, and then you suddenly find yourself qualifying down in last place in your class. Well, then your motif suddenly becomes that you need to make your way all the way up the field, and you've got to carve your way on free. You can't fuel save anymore, and you may have to switch to a more aggressive strategy, perhaps move on to a free stop. Alternatively, have a very aggressive opening stint and much slower second and third stint on the two-stop by comparison. But of course, our drivers will practice all their different strategies. They will plan out those scenarios. Indeed, the team managers behind the scenes will be talking to them over the course of this qualifying session and in the race, advise them of what's working and what's not working. And I can tell you right now, what's working out here for Protect Motorsport is having Ryan Moles back on circuit, as we see the Audi R8 LMS driver making his way up towards Sunset Bend, heading into the final braking zone very shortly. Trail braking his way on in, and we haven't seen Ryan Moles for the last couple of rounds. Of course, he was your winner at Daytona in round number 2 in that rather unique finish between himself and teammate Daniel Thomas, where in the end he managed to sneak ahead by a nose come the finish line. But as he makes his way across the timing line at this time, he goes on to his first flying lap of this qualifying session. Indeed, all of our drivers getting themselves set for success right now, and well, we will jump on board when they start to make the ones to their second flying laps. Of course, this first flying lap starting to be a bit compromised initially by the fact that drivers haven't got the full tyre temperature that they so desire, and also they're just still finding the momentum and the kinks of the car, and also track temperature is gradually evolving. As we do see Ryan Moles making his way on around here, we can also see on the right hand side of your screen there that continued ambient temperature and track temperature at 23 degrees centigrade at the moment, with partial cloud over the circuit. And in fact, it is quite early in the morning here rather than late in the evening. But as we do see Moles making his way on around at the moment, well, the temperature will gradually come up over the course of the racing today, and that will be a factor to our drivers' calculations when it comes to tyre preservation and also at their lap times. But as we hide the weather on the way there, we look to Sean Valandia in the Tiki SimSport McLaren McLaren MP412C. And in terms of the run of form we are expected here, well, this circuit does cater to most machines. It has its straight zones, its acceleration zones, and also its heavy corner sequences. There's no real perfect car here, or one perfect way to set up the car. We'll see some drivers run a lot of downforce, which will work out well, of course, in the middle corner sequences, but it will cost them dear on the straights. Conversely, those who run less downforce will have to be a little bit more snap sensitive through the corner sequences, particularly those medium speed corners in the middle portion of the lap, and also at Le Mans corner, it turns 15 into 16, but they'll have the advantage on the straights and be able to pull away or catch on up. But as we do see Sean Delaney making his way on around here to go on to another flying lap, we jump aboard with the McLaren driver as he takes us around for a lap of Sebring International Raceway. Heading down towards turn number 1 here, the elite driver getting ready to go onto the brakes. He bounces his way in, bouncing off the concrete slabs down to 4th gear, and then pound his way out to turn number 1 and charging up towards turn number 3. Through the King of 2 and now onto the brakes, 100 yards from quarter entry, and as he comes down to 2nd gear, gets a nice late apex, powers across the apex of 4, and now trail braking into turn 5. They go for a very late apex. You have to get the line, and as he comes it out, takes a little bit too much exit curve. That unsettles the car, but he gets full throttle on through Big Bend at turn 6, and now heads down towards the hairpin at turn 7. A brief breather here as he looks to his cones on his left-hand side and braking out 160 yards before corner apex, coming all the way down to 1st gear in the slightest corner of the circuit, and now powering out the straight line between the 2 kicks, and now heading up through the Fangio Seekers through turn 8, and now through the left-hander at turn number 9, flat out all the way here up towards turn number 10. It's been a good lap so far, and as he looks to his brake marker, braking at 150 yards, down the gearbox to 2nd gear, and coming through the right-hander into Collier at turn number 11, and as he powers through here, flat out all the way up to 4th gear, as he gets ready to brake into Tower Corner, straight line through 12, brakes there nice and late for turn number 13, gets a late apex, takes a bit of apex curve that unsettles the car and causes it to drift a little bit wide, understeers out, but as he makes way back up to full throttle now, up to 4th gear, up to 5th as he comes on through turn number 14, brings it on down through Bishop and braking hard here to the first part of Le Mans at turn 15, down to 3rd gear. This is where it gets very tricky, of course, because you can't really see the circuit at this point. You have to just have it in your mind where the circuit is as he comes through Le Mans corner in 2nd gear and now powers his way down Holman Straight. Now most of the lap complete, the hardest corner is about to arrive as he heads up towards Sunset Bend, and it's the hardest because watch how late he has to brake here to find the apex. Looks to his left-hand side for his brake markers. There's the 200-yard board, and as he comes on down there, brakes away effectively 50 yards from quarter apex there. If you draw a straight line down a 3rd gear, now powering out there, but it's such a late trail braking zone. Uses all the corner exit there as he powers back on and charges to a timeline. But what a beautiful lap from Valandia as he comes on through. Doesn't quite improve on his previous best, but that is a lap of Sebring Raceway International as he made his way out around there. Well, the elite driver definitely trying to deliver. Currently 5.5 tenths off of the provisional pole lap in the elite class as set by Matthew Crisp, but there's still plenty of time out there and all tries to try to find it. But as we look to our other classes here, any surprises so far? Well, Darren Sharple's of course one of the biggest potential gainers here today in terms of that battle for P2 in the AM class championship. Aaron McGregor will our reigning champion as of this series, currently the fastest man out there in the pit lane on the 59.587, and we are expecting the fastest lap times here to be in the 59s for the AMs and the pros, and potentially the 58s for our elites. And we see our first 58 on the board there from Matthew Crisp at 58.979, but Sharp was here really leaving nothing up to chance as he is the 2nd fastest after McGregor, but McGregor just finding a lap out there, and well, right now nobody able to come close to it in the AM class as we say hello to the bad game of 0 there, who wishes everyone good luck for tonight. Now, as our drivers head on around, of course, we look to Darren Fellows here currently with his P5 in the Pro Class. He loses the rear of the car, catches it there for BDM Racing. But you can see trying to get the power down out of 3 into 4, and the momentum change on that Ferrari just catching the rear car out. And as he makes his way out of 6 and down towards 7, well, this is going to be a cool down lap here. He'll just want to get those tyre temperatures back down. Of course, we have a slide like that. It really does heat the tyre compound up, and it takes the best part of half a lap to cool the tyre off and get it set to go once again. And the 404 driver there will not want to make that mistake twice over this lap, as otherwise he'll effectively have to scrap the next lap as well because of how much there'll be that temperature spike on the tyre, and it can lead to some blistering. But meanwhile, as we look from our Ferrari driver up to our fastest man in qualifying so far over on in the elite class of Matthew Crisp here, the BMW M4 driver just under a 10th faster than Håkon Grebstad, and well, Grebstad definitely not leaving anything untouched on the circuit there. And the McLaren driver from Ignium Motorsport really trying to put the pressure here on Crisp, the privateer, but Chris right now has struck first blood when it comes to these qualifying laps, and with only one more lap after the one he's currently on, can he find a bit more time? Meanwhile, Håkon Grebstad here, your champion in the elite class as of round at number 7, and he'll want to end on the ultimate high, which is to seal off the championship with a further win. But of course, as he makes his way out to turn number 16, it's easier said than done when you're competing at this level, and Chris Grebstad, no strangers to battling one another hard, of course. We saw that in the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit in particular, where the two had quite the coming together in the Mercedes arena. But as we see Grebstad making his way through the final quarter, onto the brakes and rolling through, goes a little bit deep. In fact, he catches the car out as he sets himself up for a new lap. Meanwhile, looking on further down the field, we look to our AM driver here, Daniel Pace, the old dudes in cars driver, currently P10 in class, improves to 201.749 and parks up there, knowing that is his qualified session complete. I don't think he's got any more fuel left, but he's completed 3 laps. He will not have another available to him, as Brock Freites, meanwhile, makes his way out of the final corner and heads down towards turn number 1. Now as Freites comes around, P7 currently in the AM class, and we have seen Freites, of course, gradually grow over the course of the season and competed to be inside that top 5 come the very end of it for UKSimRacing as he comes into turn at number 1. But McGregor, after setting that 59.587, has not come out the pit lane again. Aaron McGregor really does feel confident. Freites there with a mistake cost him dear. Meanwhile, Adrian Kukulas coming through the final corner, and we jump on board here with our Porsche 911 GT3R driver for a flying lap in the AM class. Heading down towards turn number 1, where we'll see the Porsche strong through these medium speed corners such as turn 1, where the car should have a lot more natural rotation. And as he comes to the opening corner, you can see exactly the point in question as he heads up towards turn 3 and onto the brakes there at the 100-yard board. Down to second gear, really attacking the lap here. We love to see this from Kukulas when we ride on board. Of course, the Porsche required a very aggressive approach as a driver, perhaps a little bit too aggressive down the exit at turn 5, but he keeps it together as he rides off the exit curve, and as he makes his way through Big Ben and down towards turn 7, getting ready to head into the hairpin here, onto the brakes at the 175-yard point as he comes down to first gear, goes for a nice tight apex, and as he powers out here from first gear all the way at the gearbox now, using the accelerational strength of the Porsche. It's not straight line speed, which is the strength, but he gets up the gearbox to full gear very quickly. But as he heads up towards turn number 10, now we'll start to see the car plateau in terms of straight line acceleration. But unfortunately, he's got a braking zone there for turn 10, brings it down to second gear, powers out, uses a little bit of the runoff space there at turn number 10's exit, catches the car in time, but almost on the ragged edge there as he comes into Tower Corner at 13. Down the gearbox he goes to second gear, 65 miles an hour at quarter apex, and as he powers his way down through Bishop Corner very shortly, and here now it's all about collecting the car into turn 15. He'll look to bring the car gradually over to the left hand side, onto the brakes he goes there at the end of the entry curve, and as he comes through the right hand and brings the direction change back together, the momentum absolutely planted on the car as he comes through his 16th, third gear as he exits, and as he powers down the Auburn straight now, he'll hope that he's carried enough exit speed to offset any lack of straight line speed he has here as he heads up towards Sunset Bend. Now heading into the braking zone here again, we'll get to see how late he brakes into the final corner. Of course, those cones just an indicator of where the corner is, but he brakes after them, goes for a very late entry there, but brings it to a nice late apex towards the inside wall as he powers out there. So nice lap from Kukulas, heads to the timeline. He's the fastest of anybody in the AM class in the first subsector, but as he crosses the timeline there, well, Kukulas does not improve and stays P4 in the AM class, but I think he'll feel as though he gave it everything there as he completes his qualified session. Most of our drivers have completed their sessions now. Stephen Masters still making his way on around, and you may be wondering earlier whilst we watch Masters make his way around, why did I say earlier about through the run of turns 15 and 16 it's where the circuit disappears? Well, a little bit of trivia for you. Back when this circuit opened in the 50s, where it was commonplace where drivers would actually get lost when they were racing in the latter half of the lap. This circuit has not gone through too many configuration changes over its extensive history, and that's because, as you see our driver here making his way into turns 15 and 16, the road markings or the curbs that are there today were not necessarily there in the beginning. It meant as our drivers made their way onto the old runway concourse, well, they got lost in because all the concrete slabs looked very similar and the runway markings were still there. Of course, those have been altered for the purposes of our drivers being able to see where they go, but it used to be in endurance races, you would have sometimes multiple drivers retiring from the race because they simply got lost and never could find their way back onto the circuit. But thankfully that has been resolved here and our drivers know exactly where to go. But as we see Masters making his way out of the final corner and down towards turn number 1 here, it's his final lap on the board. He's currently P6 in the elite class. Does he improve further? He jumps to P5. He dethrones Cy Anthony down a place with 59.232, and well, we still do have some laps to go, including Mark Johnson here, the UKSimRacing AM driver in the Mercedes. And well, we heard it from Mark Johnson in the build-up to today, earlier on this week, talking about the fact that the choice of the Mercedes for this season perhaps was not the most ideal choice. Indeed, if you look at the number of cars on the grid and who picked the Mercedes, well, Mark Johnson today, to put it in perspective, the only Mercedes AMG Evo 2022 driver out there, but in fact 2020 machine, we should clarify, but as he makes his way on around here in the German spec machine, Will Johnson giving it his best here. And this car, of course, known for its straight line speed and also acceleration, but less so the cornering, very prone to understeer on medium and high speed corners, and also to oversteer on that low-speed corner exit, with there being so much torque delivered to the rear wheels by that 6.3-litre V8 engine. Of course, naturally aspirated, no supercharger there, but as he makes his way out of 15 into 16 now, Johnson in P4, currently 6 tenths off of the fastest lap, and will looking to find a 10th as a minimum, but he goes wide there out of 16, and that lap will have to be aborted. He will have one more to go, but I think Johnson's called it there with time up, and that is qualified complete, ladies and gentlemen. In the elite class, and overall pole's gone to Jacko Taylor with a 58.977 by 2 thousandths in the end over Matthew Chris. They'll line up on your front row. In the pro class, it's Nathan Scott who's taken pole position in the Lamborghini, and look at that, Peter Cox has taken Peter ahead of John Eddowes there. Well, neither one of them getting the bonus points. Now Peter Cox knows he finishes P2 today, he has to get the bonus point for fastest lap in the race. Eddowes, meanwhile, well, it starts to become a little bit simpler. Of course, he'll want to out-qualify Cox, but the two of them we started together on row number 7 of the grid, and in the AM class it's Aaron McGregor who'll be on pole and will be P12 overall with a 59.587. That's qualifying over, ladies and gentlemen, and now we head to the grid for today's race. So this is how they line up then for the season finale in the UKSimRacing GT3 League Season 9. Jacko Taylor takes pole position for Tiki Simsport Car Marte by 2 thousandths over the privateer of Matthew Crisp. On the second row is Håkon Grebstad from Ignium Motorsport, who is joined by Daniel Lee, the privateer, followed up by the combination of Stephen Masters and Cy Anthony on the third row. Then it is Nathan Scott for Simran Racing Blue, who is your pro pole sitter at P7 over. Congratulations to him on a superb qualifying lap, and he is joined by Ryan Molson, ProTech Motorsport. Then behind them, it's Nathan Foster, who starts off the 5th row there for Simran Racing Blue, who is joined by Sean Valendia for Tiki Simsport Kimi. And we have that confirmation of Foster being in attendance today, but not Joe Newman. Then Martin Tilley for Tiki Simsport Copa, who starts off your 6th row, and he is joined by your AM pole sitter of Aaron McGregor there, who starts P12 with another superb qualifying lap. Behind them, we then have the parent on row at number 7 of Peter Cox from UKSimRacing, and his main championship rival, of course, the two belligerents side by side on the grid, and I think it's going to be a spicy run to turn number 1, with John Eddowes there starting P14 for Tiki Simsport Kimi. On the 8th row, it's Alex Hill for Tiki Simsport, who is joined by Carl McGirt, the privateer, and on row number 9, it's David Larson for Symphony Esports White in the Ghostbusters Mobile, the Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo, joined by Darren Sharples there, your second place qualifier in the AM class, who starts P18. Then completing the top 20 on row 10, it's Frank Klein from Tiki Simsport Copa, who is joined by UKSimRacing's Mark Johnson in a stronger qualifying performance compared to recent rounds. Then in P21, starts off your 11th row, it's Adrian Kukulis there, followed up by Darren Fellows for BDM Racing. And on row number 12, we have Michael Warrington from Tiki Simsport Car Marte, who is joined by Casper Brotnoff by Old Dudes in Cars. Then on row number 13, as we continue to make our way down the order and the formation lap gets underway, it is Brock Freites for Tiki Simsport, who is joined by Simon Hartley for Tiki Simsport Corpa, followed up by Chris Edison, who starts off your 14th row for UKSimRacing, joined by James Connolly, the privateer. Our 15th row is made up of Daniel Pace for Old Dudes in Cars, who is joined on said row by Jack Bullock for Tiki Simsport Kimi, and then we have the pair of Dion Wren and Ben Watkinson, the two privateers who line up on your 16th and final row of the grid. 32 drivers in attendance, ladies and gentlemen. 90 minutes of racing await our drivers, and well, as they make the way on around here, we've not got long to go as Jacko Taylor there immediately, I think, trying to get the message through to what is there, the pace car, to get a move on. He wants to go racing as quickly as possible here. Of course, qualified extremely well, and well, now it's all going to be on him to try and break away from the field as he gets this race underway. But as our drivers get themselves set, of course, we've still got plenty of time remaining here in the racing. It is not going to be over for a long period of time today. Indeed, set yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't had that quick bathroom break, if you haven't got yourself that quick glass of water, You have got approximately 1 minute now, before, about 2 minutes before we get underway here behind the pace car currently. But when we get going, it is going to be frantic to the finish. And indeed, we have 2 championships to still wrap up. We have the Pro Class, which is between Eddowes and Peter Cox. They line up together on row number 7 on the grid. It is John Eddowes who is the favourite. Meanwhile, for Peter Cox, he's the underdog, and he knows he's got to do everything right today. He's missed out an opportunity to take pole. That has gone to Nathan Scott, and we see that Dan Blackwell saying that Nathan Scott to elite there with an elite qualifying lap. Well, can Nathan Scott potentially upset the apple cart for Eddowes and Cox by making it a win in his favour today? And also, we do have the big battle for second place in the AM class behind, and Darren Sharples, one of the fastest drivers out there, who is started all the way back in what is the 8th row of the grid. As he gets underway, he'll be looking to make sure he finishes P2 as a minimum, and he could see that second place come to right at the end. We also have the Teams Championship to conclude here, and of course it's UKSimRacing for a sizable advantage, but Ryan Moles for Protect Motorsport, he's by his lonesome, but he'll be looking to get as many points as possible to try to upset UKSimRacing's glory come the very end or take it to the wire. But he's got an absolutely unfathomable task to deal with here today, and we've got all the other drivers as well, not just the ones we mentioned, but everybody looking to end their championship campaign on a high. Could we see some surprises? Could we see new winners at the finish? Well, all that and more is about to come as our drivers make the way through the final corners here. They head down through Le Mans very shortly, and Jacko Taylor finds himself on the front row for the first time in the endurance races this season. He's got Håkon behind him, he's got Matthew Crisp alongside him, and Daniel Lee in P4. Of course, we know he always plays some sort of strategic masterclass here, but as our drivers all make the way down the final stretch, the safety car will continue to head along. It will shortly start to pull away as Jacko Taylor will dictate the pace, and then we wait to go green for 90 minutes of racing action. As Tampax come for ours, what's the most popular car in this race? Well, it does seem to be a combination of the Ferrari and the Audi R8, but whether the car's popular or not, everybody has given it their all this season, and now we are only 1 corner away from seeing the green. As he makes his way out the final corner, it's away we go for 90 minutes of racing action in the season finale, and Jacko Taylor with a brilliant start there, catching the field off guard as they head down towards turn number 1. Notice Chris home to defend versus Grebstad as they come into the opening corner. Daniel Lee tucked in behind. Meanwhile, Nathan Scott there, holding a tight inside line as well. The drivers make the way through. Peter Cox versus John Eddowes, and we see Cox there holding firm ahead of Eddowes as they make the way into turn number 3. Stephen Masters on the offensive here versus Anthony Sides. He getting a good start but falling back. Meanwhile, Ryan Moles, they're getting tucked in behind Anthony as they come on through. Adrian Kukulis a little bit further back, has been involved in a slight incident into turn 3 from what we gather. As our drivers all make their way through the opening sequence of corners here, most of our drivers have survived the initial corners, and we can see they're a little bit further back. Kukulis has fallen backwards, but still in the running order here, so everyone survived the opening 5 corners as they charge their way up towards turn number 7 here. Everybody onto the brakes, now into the hairpin short. Valandia covering off. What is Peter Cox says? Eddowes has found his way through. We've got contact further back. We've got a car sliding wide. I believe that's one of the TE Simsport machines, and also David Larson being caught out there on the outside as they make their way up towards turn number 10 here. And meanwhile, Larson continues to fall backwards as a slight knock has cost him the momentum. And in front of him, that's Frank Clyde, and Clyde was the car that we saw sliding, and in Larson having to take evasive action as they make their way to turn 11. But rolling on through there, Daniel Pace as well, looking up the inside, but Kukulis immediately on the re-attack here as he tries to regain the place he lost early on. And as they come up towards turn number 13, all the drivers keeping it calm, keeping it simple. They know there's a lot of racing to go, and Kukulis up the inside of Jack Bullen, he gains another place here. Does the driver flying the American flag, but racing for Australia, as you can see on the rear of the car as he makes his way down towards turn number 15. But what a brilliant start to the race as they make their way up towards the Le Mans corner. We look to the front of the field, who've just exited that aforementioned corner. We can see Jacko Taylor holding firm. Meanwhile, Håkon Grebstad on the inside here of Chris as they head up towards Sunset Bend, looking tight here into the braking zone. I think they're both going to swap places here and not put up too much of a fight, both recognising there's more to this race than just the opening laps. And as they come on around to complete lap number 1, Well, definitely we have seen some early moves, but nothing too contentious so far. Jacko Taylor leads. He heads on to lap number 2 ahead of Håkon in P2. Crispin P3 followed by Lee P4. Stephen Masters P5. Then Science P6. Behind them Ryan Moles P7 ahead of the pro leader Nathan Scott P8 there for Sebring Racing Blue. Then Martin Tin and Nathan Foster wrap up the top 10 with Aaron McGregor, your AM leader P11 best of rest. We've got a driver off just ahead, I believe that's one of the Ferraris. That's Stephen Masters who's got it wrong into turn 1. Also third behind, I see one other car getting it wrong, and that was Peter Cox. They're running a little bit deep and wide. But as we bring the battle box up in the bottom right hand corner of your screen, we can see the Masters making a mistake. It's causing all the field to concertina through turn 5, and this is not going to help Martin Tilley nor Nathan Foster as they head up towards turn number 7 once again. As they come down towards the braking zone here, we can see a move being on the cards for Martin Tilley, and also then Nathan Foster trying to get into it. It's Tilley who goes all in here. Masters gives it the space. The two of them make their way out of the corner, and Tilley falls back once again there with the Ferrari using its acceleration as he comes on through Fangio and up towards turn number 10. Well, now Nathan Foster looking for the charges. We ride on board with the Porsche driver from Sebring Racing Blue. Looks up the inside, can't quite find it at the moment. Deciding discretion is the better part of valour as they head out of 10 and up towards Tower Corner. But Nathan Foster definitely showing his fangs early on in this race and wanting to get the move done nice and early, but a little bit of understeer there, just catching the driver out as he breaks his way into Tower, coming through 13 then 3/10 ahead of Aaron McGregor behind. You can see there in the video camera in the middle of the car, rear view mirror effectively as they head on down. Well, McGregor's going to look for the move here. It's too wide through Bishop Corner, turn 14. McGregor's going to go around the outside. Foster defends hard, but McGregor goes all in here. McGregor trying to make early ground and make it another top 10 overall. And as they come on through the right-hander, Foster defends hard, but this is going to cost the pair of them so much time. And John Eddowes now stacking onto the back of this. And Eddowes has had the start. Once he's found his way ahead of Peter Cox, and now he's up the inside of McGregor, but Eddowes he does not need to do anything silly. Oh goodness me, and McGregor in contact with Eddowes. Meanwhile Peter Cox gets caught there by McGregor's wayward car, and Peter Cox survives, or does he? He brings the car to a stop and he just stops it clear of the tyre barrier, and that could have been near fatal for his championship aspirations. Now there will be a cloud hanging over the pair of them, and given the fact all students done post round, well, we could see things go to the wire after the race today. It's not the way we want to see things, but of course drama does happen. And meanwhile Stephen Masters here will now fall in further back as Carl McGuirk tucked in behind there, and we can see the privateer for Racing Forces as he comes up towards turn number 3, picking up more places as he goes, as he heads on through onto another lap. But definitely a contentious moment there between a number of drivers, and as we do have a brief breather, we have an opportunity to look at some of the incidents that occurred on the opening laps. But before we do, we see Jack Bullen here being passed by James Conley, who goes round the outsider into turn 1, but it's Bullen versus Conley here for what is P9 in the AM class, P26 overall, and Bullen not giving up here as Conley gives it the space on the inside, looks to return, run through 4 into 5, but Bullen there holds the inside line, covers off Conley, and Conley has to wait his turn as it's a nice return move for Bullen. But as they make their way down towards turn number 7, we look to Frank Klein here, who comes charging on through, and in the run all the way up towards turn number 10 once again, running P2 in the AM class right now with Darren Sharples, your leader in the AM class at this point. And here is Sharples as we ride on board the gearbox of the privateer, and you can see Klein in the distance there with Larson behind, and if things finish as they are currently, Sharples would effectively take P2 in the AM class here if he's to take the win today in this endurance race round, which would be a surprise run of form for the 777 driver, given the bad luck he had early on in the season. And Aaron McGregor seeing the indomitable spirit, I think for Sharples, he'll be smiling from ear to ear as we hear that Aaron McGregor is in the pit lane currently, and the car is being repaired after a tow to the pits. But as we do see Sharples making his way on around here, coming out to the long corner at the moment, a little bit of an error there. Oh goodness me, in contact with Fellows. Well, we only saw the aftermath of that, and further contact from Klein as Sharples there. I think he's got a damaged front suspension because the car's just straight line, he can't bring it off the road, and as he tries to get back onto the tarmac, I think Sharples here is just a passenger in a wayward Lamborghini, and the good luck has gone bad very early on as he now tries to get the car around through Sunset Bend. We see that car going sideways, and that is Chris Ennisford in the McLaren MP412C, the UKSimRacing driver, just getting caught out and breaking into Sunset Bend, and it's all gone wrong. And Peter Cox, meanwhile, I believe with an early retirement, that is the Pro Championship over, unless I'm mistaken, because Peter Cox has retired, as our timing tower tells us, and that means it will go the way of John Eddowes, and it's not the way we expected it whatsoever. But meanwhile, as we look from the midfield back up to the top 3, Daniel Lee currently P3 ahead of Matthew Crisp, has fallen down the order very gradually, but as we finally do get a breather here, We see our drivers making their way on around onto another lap. We have a chance to take a look back at what happened on the opening lap and the subsequent one starting, what happened to Adrian Kukulas at the very start of the race. We'll look at Kukulas here in the silver Porsche, right in the middle, three-way contact. Goodness me, Kukulas being sent around with Mark Johnson there. There was barely space enough for two, let alone three, and Johnson and Kukulas coming together, and that's when Kukulas rejoined, and he picked the perfect time to rejoin. He just slotted in there like a jigsaw piece in a puzzle. Albeit I don't think he'll be too pleased with how it's played out, but it could have been far worse for Kukulas, but he found his way back into the order, and then a little bit later on the open lap, Alex Hill, Casper Brotner being involved in an instant, making their way down towards turn number 16. This was Hill at the time, Brotner just ahead of him, in fact behind him I do believe. Hill went on around, and then what happens to Casper Brotner's the question. Well, Brotner has gone completely off the circuit. The old dudes in cars machine in a separate incident in its entirety. We're not quite sure how that's happened for Brotner. In fact, we tried to take a look back, and I think cold tyres in this may explain it as he came down into turn 14. Rear of the car starts to step loose, but no sign there. But 15 as he rolled off the entry curbing into 16, that's where the car stepped loose on him. As we return to live pictures for a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen, and we do start to queue up the replays of what happened in subsequent laps. Return to these live pictures here, we can see that your race leader at the moment, Jacko Taylor, continued to break away by an advantage of 4/10 over Håkon Grebstad, and then Daniel Lee a further 1.5 seconds behind. This top two starting to creep away, with Nathan Foster meanwhile being passed there by John Eddowes. The SimRacing blue driver also losing out to Sean Valandia, who goes up the inside, and well, that's a change of class position there between Valandia and Foster, and now Foster back in P9 in the elite class. Meanwhile, Eddowes just gained an overall position on the pair as they come through turn number 5, but it does look as though after an early set of gains, Nathan Foster now starting to lose momentum here, albeit could it be a sign of strategy that's to come, given the fact we're not even 10 minutes into this 90-minute race. Whereas he heads on down towards turn 7, I think he'll be hoping that's the plan in terms of strategy. But in the meantime, we did have a couple of other incidents on subsequent laps, and well, we had an incident for Ben Watkinson firstly, which we're about to take a look back at. Now, this was Ben Watkinson, you'll see in the McLaren behind the manoeuvre being made by Conley on Dion Wren. And as Watkinson came through turn 1, well, just the rear of the car snapping loose there at the opening corner, and a knock to the tyre barrier, unfortunate for Watkinson, and not the way he wanted it to go. Meanwhile, well, we also did have the incident for Aaron McGregor, and how did that happen for Aaron McGregor? Well, we're seeing the aftermath here, Peter Cox having to take evasive action, but there was a little bit before that when it all kicked off, and well, we try to understand how it all started. As we take a look back to Peter Cox here, and you can see Eddowes down the left of the pitch, and Aaron McGregor as he came on around. Well, there was contact between Eddowes and McGregor. We're not quite sure who's the culprit there. Thankfully, that's for the stewards to decide, and Peter Cox having to take evasive action in the scene of the incident. Not the way he wanted it to go whatsoever. But as we ride on board from Eddowes' perspective here, and well, you can see as McGregor just tries to pull out a small tap there to Eddowes, and the question will be, was Eddowes pointing the steering wheel straight, and did McGregor turn onto Eddowes' front bumper? Eddowes practically unaffected by that, but that is one of the moments, it's perhaps one of the most dramatic moments of the season right at the end, where it's going to be a season finale to remember for a number of drivers, but for some it may not be for the reasons they wanted. But as we return here, Nathan Foster now in these live pictures being attacked by Stephen Masters in the battle for P9 in the elite class. Masters up the inside and gets the move done immediately there into turn 1, and Foster not pushing the tempo whatsoever, as now Carl McGurk is going to look up the inside into turn 3, and Foster being robbed there at 2 places in the space of 3 corners. And well, there may be a problem with that Porsche. Alternatively, he's definitely trying to play the slow and steady strategy right now as they come on around. But as we see our drivers here making their way through the big bend once again. Meanwhile, further down the order, we've got a number of drivers in the pit lane, including Darren Sharples and also Darren Fellows. And Sharples, of course, after that brilliant start, it's all unfolded the wrong way around for Sharples, as we do see him here parked up at the P11 in class. And well, for Sharples, it's definitely not been a positive day. But meanwhile, for Dion Wren, by comparison, it's been a strong day. He's gained 3 places in class so far, P4 now in the pro class, P17 overall, as he tries to chase down David Larson, who's 5 seconds up the road, and he's closing on him gradually. As we do see Wren heading on down towards turn number 10. We do have some other incidents to discuss, including what happened to James Conley on lap number 2, and we do have a replay. Well, this was after the scene of the Peter Cox incident and Aaron McGregor incident, as we saw Connie coming into the corner, came in far too hot there, contact to the rear of the 247 car, Jack Bullen, and both drivers then being involved in that incident. I think Connie trying to carry a lot of speed, and Bullen braking earlier than what Colin anticipated, Colin anticipated, we should say, and that's the way it all worked out for the pair of them there, but that does explain what happened. And meanwhile, after that, of course, we saw what happened to Peter Cox, what happened to Darren Sharples, I hear you ask, and well, this was from the lead of the AM class, and we'll just contact the BDM racing machine of Darren Fellows, and in fact, we can take a look back at what happened earlier. This was on lap number 3, and Fellows went wide down Le Mans corner, uncontrollable car snapped loose, and also Chris Edisford there getting it wrong in the rear of the picture, so the two pro drivers have been involved in the incident. And then for Sharples, we can see him at the bottom of the camera as the camera focuses on him. The 777 driver just ended up in an incident that was not his fault, and indeed just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But as we do return to live pictures now, and we do look to the race in action, we won't have any more replays for a brief amount of time. Of course, with everything that's happened, we do look to our drivers continue to press on here, and well, we can confirm that we have had retirements in the following classes so far. We have had a retirement in the pro class for Chris Edisford and Peter Cox, and with that, that will mean that your champion in the pro class now, by default, will be John Eddowes. Indeed, Eddowes is your championship leader going into tonight, and well, whilst there may be a little bit of question about the contact of Aaron McGregor, I cannot foresee that changing the outcome of the championship. Meanwhile, in the AM class, we do have a retirement for what is Aaron McGregor. I do believe that Daniel Page is currently in the pit lane that's still being so. In fact, he's making his way out of the circuit. It's Daniel Page, albeit multiple laps down. So we have seen, after what is 12 minutes of race action, now into our 14th minute in fact, but we have seen a grand total of what is 3 retirements, but we've still got plenty of racing to go here. And well, with it, of course, we've got the big question of who now can calm things down and master the art of strategy. And we'll look into Brock Freights, who being chased by Dion Wren, also trying to chase after Michael Warrington, and these two Ferrari drivers in the TE Sport Ferraris, both good friends of the circuit, and as teammates, they won't want to make too much of a fight with one another because they'll both have their respective races, but they'll be mindful of the fact they'll both want to end the season with a little bit of bragging rights in terms of I was able to beat in the season finale. But meanwhile, we look a bit further up the road here, and Nathan Scott on the inside into Sunset Bend. Martin Tillich going around the outside, but the pro leader's not going to give this up. Tillich goes very deep into the corner. Nathan Scott, meanwhile, hugs the inside well, gets it hooked up nice and going onto the marbles there. Notice how Eddowes now trying to look around the outside of his teammate as the two Tiki SimSport machines head down towards turn 1. And I think Eddowes here, given what happened with McGregor, he won't want any drama. But meanwhile, tilling up the inside there, and well, with the door being left right open by Nathan Scott, and Scott now under pressure from Eddowes as Eddowes tries to take the lead of the pro class into turn 3. Can't quite find it. Meanwhile, and Nathan Scott there with the Sebring Racing blue driver after a brilliant defence at turn 17, making Tillich take to the marbles. In the end, Nathan Scott being caught a little bit knackered perhaps as he comes through Big Ben and now down towards the hairpin, but I think it is wide. As long as he keeps the pro lead, he won't be complaining too much as they head up towards the right-hander. As they break the way into the next corner, of course, Nathan Scott now, without that buffer of the elite driver behind him, will be mindful of the fact that he's now racing for position rather than overall position. We're racing in class position, we should say. And as he heads up towards turn number 10, with Sean Valendia there being let through by Eddowes. And I think it is the case that the two Tiki SimSport drivers there for sister teams, respecting the fact they're in different races in their classes and therefore optimising their race approach at this point. As they head up towards turn number 13, onto the brakes they go once again, and well, things are calming down between them. But meanwhile, we look up to P3 driver Matthew Chris. This is overall and in the elite class. The privateer, after being on the front row, has dropped off the top 2, and Chris here in the 97 BMW M4, of course, talking about how strong his race performance was last time out in Interlagos and really running through the field throughout in Brazil, and now here down in P3. And I suspect he may be running strategy over pace here, because you can see how the top 2 right now are lapping on average approximately what is a second a lap faster. And I think the Grebstad and Daniel Lee both focusing on going all in on their strategies. Meanwhile, for Chris here, after his qualifying that, I think decided to play the long game, but as he heads on down, we hear that Darren Fellows is into what is the pit lane, in fact now leaving his pit box as he makes his way out there, and Fellows get himself set to go racing once again. But as our drivers come through turn at number 1, the leaders going on to their 9th lap under race conditions. We'll sight Anthony Jacko Taylor just behind, and Jacko Taylor of course putting it on pole, and the TT Sport car Marte driver dropping down to the bottom end of the top 5 as he comes out to turn number 3. We see Daniel Page then just staying off the throttle on the inside through turn at number 4 into 5 to obey the blue flags, and Page, well, he's just staying in this race right now to see what he can pick up come the end. And we do have confirmation, we have a further retirement for Darren Fellows. They let the car leave the pit box, but unfortunately when they launched out of the pit box they noticed a further issue and they have had to retire the car. So the BDM Racing driver will not be making it to the checkered flag today, and therefore in the Pro Class we now only have 4 drivers remaining after a starting field of 7. But as Taylor here continues to chase down Anthony and Chris, we do look to the YouTube chat there, we can see UKSimRacing saying, I'd say it's the Lambo with regards to the cars which are the least popular. There's been that debate, of course, between Tampax Comfort and Szymanski, and we have seen a number of McLarens, but it is the Lamborghini Huracan at GT3 Evo and also the Mercedes AMG that have both been the least popular equally this season. And we can also see there Tampax Cover asking, are those rear view screens all the same on GT3s? Most of our GT3 cars do have an interior rear view video camera. Some of them do have it placed above the driver, others have it placed on the central console, and indeed above the driver, for example, is in the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo. Again, it is dependent on the machine, but they typically do have those video cameras there, given the fact that our drivers will want full visibility from the rear bumper, not just from rear and above from their peripheral vision. But as we'll also see there, Darren Sharp will say that just no luck this season. Indeed, I feel for you, Darren, it has been a tough one for yourself, but hopefully you can have better luck in season 10. I can say right now, one driver is definitely trying to find his luck here as we ride on board with Jacko Taylor. Well, as the TT Sport car Marte driver charges after, we can see Sight Anthony there looking for the potential move into turn number 17. He couldn't quite find it, but onto the brakes now in the Audi R8 LMS, and as he comes on through the long left-hander, well, 3/10 off here, and these 3 all pushing one another in terms of pace. But of course, when you're running this close in the battle, the thing you do have to keep in mind is, are you playing against your strategy? And well, I think all 3 of them right now, I think they've got their strategy nailed on. But when you're inside Anthony and Jacko Taylor's positions, of course, in this scenario, you can start to do a little bit of short shift and lift and coast into the corners to save some extra fuel. And whilst it may only be 0.1 of a litre per lap per se, it does add up over the course of multiple laps as Taylor gets very close there to the rear of Sight Anthony. And I think Sight Anthony just back in the car and Jacko Taylor not responding until quite late in the day. But you can see that almost coming to a standstill on the braking as they make their way through Fangio and up towards turn 10 once again. But it's going to be interesting to see how the dynamic of this trio of drivers evolves over what is the next 10 minutes or so. Taylor looking very aggressive here, and I think the 115 driver at this point of the race now really started to want to gain place. I think he feels like he's got a lot of pace, but he's being held back as he comes into Tower Corner. A little bit of a wobble there off of the apex of 30. It's going to cost him time. As he heads on down through Bishop very shortly, you see how much that gap has opened up. It's almost a second there after the smallest mistake. But of course, when you're pushing this hard, smallest mistakes are going to be highly costly. And Anthony and Chris are going to show no signs of hesitation to try and break away. But as they break their way into Le Mans now through turn 16, well, Ryan Moles behind only half a second off. And therefore, the 2 Audi drivers will be gradually coming together as they head down the Allman Straight. Meanwhile, further behind, we can see here Nathan Scott, your Simran Racing, that blue pro leader. Well, behind him is John Eddowes. He has been repassed by Sean Valandia over the last lap. And as we see Daniel Page then just lifting off on the run down the back straight. And in fact, returning to the racing line there for safety purposes in the run at 2 Sunset Meadow. Of course, you can't just stay off of the racing line forever. When you do get to a corner, you need to return to some sense of speed. But as they make the way on around, Page decided to step the car wide out. They use the runoff space to let Scott and Eddowes fight one another as they head down towards turn number 1. But meanwhile, speaking of fights in, Martin Tillin defending from Sean Valandia as they come into the left-hander. This is the battle for P7 in the elite class, and whilst this is going on, we're hearing that Sight Anthony has taken the lead in that battle for P3 of the elite class as they make the way up towards turn number 3. We'll get you a replay of that very shortly. In fact, we can cut to it right now. I don't think it's quite said and done, with Chris taking a look around the outside of Big Ben there versus Anthony, and Anthony defending to the inside on the left of your picture in the Ferrari there, and the Welshman right now finding himself under pressure as Jacko Taylor comes in like a hot missile and absolutely stays staples it to the corner apex. Goodness me. The T6 car Marte drove, saw an opening and said, right, I'm going for it. And we saw him on the previous lap, of course, setting up all those runs under late braking behind Sight Anthony. And now we know why. He has got so much better potential in terms of retarding the car under braking. And it has shown there as he made his way to turn 7. But as they make the way out of turn 11 up towards 13, our drive's charging on here. And now Taylor will be looking to get past Sight Anthony. And I think it's a question of when, not if, Anthony is going to have to defend, because as we ride aboard the gearbox here of the Welshman's car, the privateer, the number 27 driver, who is clear at the moment by 4 tenths. They head into turn 15, but it's the run out to turn 16 that matters most. And we know the Ferrari is the aggressor in terms of top end speed when it gets up to top gear, but that Audi very fast out of the corners. And Anthony with that run wide, that's going to cost him a lot of momentum. You can see Taylor already within 2 tenths. They get halfway up Allman, now heading out towards the braking zone. Well, I think Taylor's going to look for the move on the inside here. He gets slightly alongside on the brakes. They go, and Anthony backs off there, decides to look for the cutback, and Jacko Taylor says, right, I'll take your hand off with that one, as he goes into the braking zone, gets it done, and Jacko Taylor moves up to P3 in the elite class there with an absolutely sensational pair of moves. But meanwhile, we look back to Nathan Scott, who continues the battle with Martin Tilling, and this is a P8 overall. It's not for class position, but the problem for Nathan Scott here is the more he battles with Tilling, the more he's been pushed backwards towards Eddowes, and Eddowes all over the back of Scott as they head into turn 1 this time. And well, we can see Nathan Scott looking for the cutback here through the opening corner, but not finding it as Tillich continues to confound him. Meanwhile, Carl McGuirt, there was a slight run wide and almost losing the rear of the car as he rejoined the racing surface. And we'll see the Englishman definitely having a bit of difficulty there on the opening corner, but with the fuel in the car right now, I think Stephen is just trying to keep it calm. Meanwhile, it is pit stop season for our AM drivers. We've got Frank Klein, Michael Warrington and Brock Freites into the pits. They've all decided to come in early here, and I think we could be seeing more pit stops coming up very shortly. But they're all battling for what is effectively a place on the final step of the podium in the AM classes. Meanwhile, we've got cars round, and that is, I believe, John Eddowes has gone round, and also, I can't quite see us, that's Stephen Masters who's got it wrong. We'll have to take a look back exactly at how that unfolded, but Eddowes right now beached on the apex of turn number 7. Well, I think Pete Cox, if he's watching this right now, will be rubbing his hands together and putting them on his face and saying, why did it not work out in my favour? Because John Eddowes there missing a major bullet with the fact his main championship rival is out of the race, and Eddowes there not punished as a result of a mistake. He's lost places in class. He's down to P4 in the pro class, but it's not going to have any effect on his final championship standings. Meanwhile, we look back to Casper Brotner, who continues to chase on down Mark Johnson, and Johnson, with everything that's played out now, P2 in the AM class here, albeit we do have 3 AM drivers in the pits on strategy, so therefore it's not all quite plain sailing in terms of track position. But as our drivers come through turn number 13, you can see behind Alex Hill just watching on here in this battle for its P17 overall, but more importantly for Johnson and Brotner, P2 in the AM class. And will the old Dutton Cars driver right now trying to hunt down the UKSimRacing Mercedes and doing everything he can in his power, but as the drivers make the way into Le Mans corner. Meanwhile, it's pit stop season for what is our elite drivers. We can see they've all come on in, minus Matthew Crisp, and Crisp, I think, now is revealing his hand, which is he's gone long compared to everybody else. He may only go 1 or 2 more laps. Nathan Foster the same, albeit Foster really fell off the pace over the opening few laps, but if they can go 1 or 2 laps further, it does give them much more leverage with regards to the fact that as they make the way in towards the later stages of this race, they may find themselves in the end jumping ahead based on strategy, or having that ability to make 1 extra pit stop if they so desire. But as we do look back to the pit lane exit, Daniel Lee comes back out behind Håkon Grebstad, albeit the gap opened up between the two of them this time, albeit now up to what is there 1.5 seconds, in fact 2 seconds, as they confirm it into turn 3. But Grebstad on strategy is your leading driver who's taken a pit stop so far, overall in the elite class, with Daniel Lee not too far off the gaze. And then we have Jacko Taylor a bit further behind after his maiden pit stop. We can see holding Sight Anthony at bay, and the difference between the two of them will Sight Anthony right on the heels of Jacko Taylor once again, with his pit stop being 6 tenths of a second faster. And that's Sight Anthony doing some fuel saving in that battle behind Chris, but keeping Taylor behind him for that time. But in the end, they have swapped places on circuit and not swapped back through the pit stops. But meanwhile, whilst this all has been playing out, we do have an opportunity to take a look back at what happened to John Eddowes and Stephen Masters on lap 12 at the turn 7 hairpin. So as they made the way down towards the braking zone, notice how there Nathan Scott covering off his rival, but as they broke into the corner, well, Edo's minding his own business, and Masters coming in a little bit too hot and turning the pair of them around. Then the number 10 driver, and well, of course, he'll be kicking himself, because it's one thing to come into contact with another driver, and then it's another thing when you make contact with a fellow driver from Tiki Simsport when you're part of the team as well. And Stephen Masters there, definitely in a major moment and a bit of an error under braking, but still they both survived it, and they make the way on as we return to the live pictures. And as we do look to our drivers heading on around it, Jacko Taylor still holding firm in P5. Matthew Crisp into the pit lane. Here he comes on down past our commentary booth window, and the number 97 driver, is this going to be enough, as Nathan Foster also comes in from P2, albeit I think he's a bit further down the order in relative stakes. And for Nathan Foster here, it's about finding his way back into the race, but P3 driver Daniel Lee has jumped up to P3. In fact, Grebstad has dropped down a place, but I don't understand what happened. I think there was an off track for Grebstad at turn 16 from what I'm gathering, but Daniel Lee, as he crosses the timeline, finds himself in the lead of this race, with Chris leaving his pit box. There you can see on the left of your picture, Grebstad coming on through now, and I think for Grebstad, he will be wanted to come back as quickly as possible, because he doesn't normally make mistakes, and the 37 driver, when he makes error, the only thing he'll want to do is to time for it as soon as possible. But as he heads up towards turn number 3, where does Chris fit into this? He falls back to P5 when all's said and done, with Jacko Taylor P3, Science P4, and Matthew Crisp with a longer stop compared to his peers, 21 seconds stationary, whereas the majority of his peers 20 seconds stationary, minus Daniel Lee and Grebstad. Well, I think that's a sign that Lee and Grebstad are both pushing in terms of not saving fuel, but Chris there with a long stop for what looked to be a fuel-saving opening stint, and I wonder where Chris was taking some extra fuel here just to give himself the option to go much deeper into this next stint of the race. Well, we'll have to wait to see how the strategy plays out, but in the meantime, let's take a look back at what exactly happened to Grebstad and how Daniel Lee took the lead of this race. This was on lap 13 to the previous lap, and as we saw Grebstad making his way, oh goodness me, in the rear of the car, coming loose there, making his way out to turn number 11. Well, we haven't seen that from any driver so far, but the Indian Motorsport driver there doing very well to catch the car, to bring it back onto circuit at Tower Corner. And Grebstad, well, I can tell you one thing right now, if he's ever decided he wants to play cricket, he's very good at catching things, and he might be good at catching the ball if he can catch a car like that, because the Norwegian definitely there saving the car from what could have been a race-ending incident with the wall, and brilliantly brought back under control. But as we do look back to your live pictures now, ladies and gentlemen, of course his task will be to chase down Daniel Lee, as meanwhile Jacko Taylor will be looking at this and thinking, okay, I've got an opportunity to jump back into P2 here after losing that ground early on. But as he heads in towards turn number 17, through the right-hander he goes. 30 minutes of this race almost complete by the time they get towards the midpoint of the next lap. We've still got a long way to go in this endurance race to wrap up the season. Indeed, we've seen plenty of drama in the opening laps, and one other thing that we have not talked about at all, here is your AM leader right now, Frank Klein, leading the way by 5.5 seconds over Michael Warrington. And well, it has been a long time since we've seen Klein on the podium, let alone leading the race. In fact, I don't think, and this is not to besmirch his reputation at all, I don't think Frank Klein has led a single lap this season in the AM class. And right now, the American is leading the way for Tiki Simsport Copa. And well, as he makes his way up towards turn number 3, we look a bit further back to Dion Wren up the inside of Nathan Foster. And Foster continuing to fall down the order very gradually. I wonder whether there is a major issue on that portion. They're just not retiring the car in the hope they can pick up some pieces here. But the number 52 driver really struggling for pace compared to his peers. And well, to put that in perspective, he's only come out of the pits recently, but as he makes his way up towards turn number 7 this time around. Foster, in fact, Nathan Foster recently in an off track from what we understand, and that all contributed to why his previous lap time was 2 minutes and 42 seconds. But as the 52 driver here heads into turn 7, he's now got Adrian Kukulis right on his rear as they make the way out of the hairpin. And I think it won't be long before Kukulis also tries to send the signal that he wants to find his way on through. They're heading up towards turn at number 10 here. 30 minutes complete, another 60 remaining. Kukulis in P3 in the AMP class. His target on Michael Warrington currently sitting the best part of what is 5 seconds up the road. And as they make the way up towards turn number 13, well, the relative between Kukulis and Warrington is that Kukulis is a little bit slower per lap, but the Porsche driver here may just simply be playing the pace and playing the long game. We won't really know what strategies we're seeing from our drivers until we've seen their second stops, and we'll have an idea based on when those second stops occur and how long the pit stop is. as Kukulis heads down into turn number 15. He's got a sizable gap over Brock Freights, who in P4 in the class, the Tiki Supersport driver, as he makes his way towards Le Mans corner. Continue to bear down on Kukulis, the gap going down by 3/10 a lap currently, but there is a long distance still as he makes his way down the Ormond Straight. But as we look from our AM drives back up to the battle for what is the pro lead, with the incident involving Edos and Masters, Nathan Scott continues to lead in the pro class, albeit he's got David Larson behind him as we jump aboard here with the Ferrari 488 Evo driver as he heads across the timeline, and the Symphony Esports white driver. It has been a long time since we've seen Larson battling for the win of the race, and well, of course you would have to think back to season 8 of the GT3 League, where he was battling hard for the win in his class then. But now in the 306 machine, continue to chase down Nathan Scott as they head into turn number 5. Through the left-hander they go, and the difference to the machines here, we know the Lamborghini, a very planted car, and very strong as an all-rounder. The Ferrari, meanwhile, very aggressive on that rear tyre wear, but very strong on the straights as they head up towards turn 7. The gap between the turns staying at 4.5 tenths as they come through the turn 7 hairpin. I think in David Larson's mind right now, and of course for Nathan Scott, both of these drivers have yet to pick up a win this season in class, so they'll both be thinking that this is their opportunity to end the season on a high and carry the momentum into season 10 should they wish to participate. And on their minds, of course, they'll be thinking that they can't afford to make any errors. The Sebring, a circuit that we've seen already, punishes drivers severely for errors, with the barriers being so close to the track surface, but alternatively the runoff here has been so great and lacking any grip, and it does mean when you get it wrong here, you're going to be losing not just 1 or 2 seconds, but typically in excess of 5 seconds, and that'll be a huge dent to your race. But heading out to turn 13, that Rue Bishop at 14, Larson falling back there on corner X, and again we are seeing that contrast, the handling capabilities of the Lamborghini versus Larson's Ferrari, which just not quite hooked up on these medium speed apexes, and the 306 driver here I think just tucking back as he waits to get close. But there, a small mistake from Scott, runs a little bit deep out of the corner, and as they head all the way down to turn at number 17, we see Chris Edison there in the YouTube chat. So thank you to everyone for tuning in today. Of course, Chris Edison, one of the masterminds at UKSimRacing, one of the head organisers, and indeed one of the people who would be able to go racing without. And unfortunate for you, Chris, of course, with that early retirement, we're sorry to see it. It's not the way you wanted your season to end. But of course, we do hope in season 10 things could go your way once again. But meanwhile, as we look from the battle for the lead of the pro class to the battle further down here, we can see Stephen Masters trying to find his way past what is Adrian Kukulis up the inside there into turn 1, and the number 10 driver here gaining what is P16 overall as he now tries to chase after what is there Nathan Foster just up the road. They're heading up towards turn number 3 here. No sign of change at the moment, but we can see that Carl McGuirk, in fact, recently getting past what is Martin Tilling, and the 2 BMW M4 drivers in the battle for P8 in the elite class. We'll work ahead right now, but as we ride aboard the gearbox here, the menacing and boisterous grille of the BMW M4, Tilling not too far away as they head up towards turn number 10. Now, of course, when you're in equal machinery here, both drivers in the same machine, it comes down to driver and the setup they've chosen to run the car for the race today. It does mean that you do end up in this little bit of a stalemate, whereby you really have to try and minimise and maximise your strengths and your weaknesses versus your opponents on the racing circuit. And for Tilling here, he now has to start to think, okay, can I stay close to McGurk, or is he going to pull away? Or if I'm going to stay close and behind him, do I potentially look to make the overtake and lose time to the drives up the road with Sean Valendia only a further 8 seconds up the road currently, or do I stay behind and fuel save? That's the balancing act you have to play as a driver. And now that we're into the mid portion of the race here, that mid portion being 30 to 60 minutes, this is where the faith and the strategy now starts to play on your mind. You think to yourself, okay, I've made it through the first stint, have I played my cards right? I can't know if I played my cards right, but you've got to be wondering about that all the time. You've got to really take that thought out of your mind, because the more you think about it, the more it distracts you from the racing. But as we see McGurk breaking away gradually from Tilling here, the gap now 4 tenths, they come through Sunset Bend. Both drivers hooking up their braking zones and apexes as they head on to another lap. Meanwhile, behind David Larson, getting closer to the back of Nathan Scott here in the battle for the pro lead. But again, the gap between them 3 tenths, they head across to the line to turn number 1 and coming back onto the brakes here. The 306 driver staying close, but just not able to find that final 5% to look for the move. But of course, Larson here, it could all be part of his game plan, just to stay close and harass the rear of his opponent as they head up towards turn number 3 once more. And meanwhile, as we look back up to the front of the field, the very front, In the battle of P2 over in the elite class, Håkon Grebstad has found his way past Jacko Taylor, and as the two of them make the way up towards turn number 13, well, they're staying close together with Daniel Lee at 4 seconds up the road and continue to try and break away. But in terms of relative lap times, they're very even at the moment, with the fastest man on circuit being Cy Anthony at this point in the race, but it's only by hundreds, with the drives of Cy Anthony, Matthew Crisp, Jacko Taylor, Daniel Lee and Håkon Grebstad all lapping within 3/10 of one another. That's how close the pace is, and therefore it's anybody's game for the win overall in the elite class currently. They're heading down into turn number 15. Of course, a little bit of trivia for you. Håkon Grebstad, the most wins in the elite class all season. And well, 3 wins for Håkon Grebstad. What is 2 wins for Daniel Thomas, not in attendance today. 1 win for Matthew Crisp. And well, also we can see there as they come down, we could see a new winner today in the form of Daniel Lee. But that adds up to what is 6 out of our 8 wins. And we've had 6 out of our 7 wins in the past. And the other win to Ryan Moles. But we have seen the wins in the elite class confined to a very singular set of individuals. Meanwhile, in the pro class, we see quite a different favour, with our only repeat winners this season being John Eddowes and Pete Scott's 2 wins apiece. And therefore it goes to show from class to class, we see a very different flavour of that championship action throughout. But as we look from the top 3 of the elite class back to the leaders of the pro class here, Larson a bit closer this time in the rundown, Allman, as he comes up through Sunset Bend, and as they head on to the next lap. I wonder now whether Larson is starting to believe a move can be on the cards, because we've seen previously the gap has oscillated between 3/10 on the start for this straight and 7/10 on the run down the Auburn straight. But now staying firm within that 3/10 all the way round the lap. Larson, of course, having to back off into these opening corners with a dirty out off the back of the Lamborghini, just taken away some of that front end downforce and causing the car to want to understeer a little bit on corner entry into the medium speed apex. It looks at his high speed corners, but as the 306 driver here stays firmly within the dirty out, within the slipstream zone of Nathan Scott's Lamborghini, we can see here now Larson not being shaken at all as he heads up towards the turn 7 hairpin. Further back we look to Adrian Kukulas, will chase it down what is then Nathan Foster, and the 2 Porsche drivers here. Kukulas has got close over the last couple of laps, but Nathan Foster keeping him there for the time as they head up towards turn number 7. And as they get ready to battle on the brakes, well, both of them have been passed recently by John Eddowes, who's found his way on through. I think Eddowes there just trying to chase after some further pro places. 8 seconds off the race leader at the moment is Eddowes. And as we do look here to your de facto pro champion, come the checker flag, the Tiki Sport Kimi driver for the number 70 car at the moment. It's not the way he wanted the championship to end. I think he'll be looking to make it a win here, for the simple reason he'll want to end with a win after that incident between himself and McGregor, and what unfortunately led to Peter Cox's early retirement. But as he heads out to turn number 13, I'm sure he'll have banished that from his mind for now and only be focusing on the race that remains. But as we look from them back to Nathan Scott, your leader, of course, in the pro class, with that 4/10 of a second advantage, and Dion Wren is closing on this pair gradually. In fact, Dion Wren right now the fastest of your pro drives out on circuit, just previously set a previous best of what is a 2-minute flat .09, whereas Nathan Scott lapping on the 2-minute 0.9s, and we can see David Larson on a 2-minute 1 to be precise. Well, these two definitely taking time out of one another, and we are seeing the rest of the pro field start to catch up as they make their way onwards towards the next lap as they head down towards turn 1. Notice how coming through Sunset Bend that time, Larson very close within only 2 attempts at the apex and having to back the car off. I think now Scott may just be starting to run out a little bit of steam, and the pressure is continuing to build. As they come through turn at number 3 and up towards 5 they go. Larson there, just a little bit of wobble coming off of 3 and into 4. The Ferrari driver definitely having to push the Ferrari all the way to the limits. Meanwhile, Scott absolutely planted as they come down towards turn number 7. And we see a question there, question from it, there's nothing here, asking any idea what the temps are, chaps. Well, we can give you an update on how the weather has evolved since the start of the race, and we can see that on the right hand side of your screen. Ambient temperature still staying at a nice 23 degrees centigrade. Track temperature has increased to 26 over the course of the opening 40 minutes of racing action. So we have seen the track temperature come up, but not too aggressively here. And I think in part of that, the partial cloud that we're seeing over the circuit has aided with the circuit temperature being quite stabilised, and therefore we are seeing tyre temperatures start to rise, but not as aggressively perhaps they would have if the weather had been brilliant sunshine. And as the drivers make their way onwards through this race, head towards the halfway point now, it does mean that they will be able to extend the duration of that tyre compound just a little bit more compared to if we saw a track temperature heading upwards of 30 degrees centigrade, as we do hide the weather there. And we look back to that battle for P3 in the elite class overall as well. Jacko Taylor falling away from Håkon Grebstad, and now under pressure from Sight Anti, who gets the better run out of the final corner here, and Taylor's going to have to defend hard. It's Anti on the left of your pitch. Now Sight will look to capitalise. He'll have the straight line speed of the Ferrari, but Taylor will have the inside line, and the inside's so pivotal. We're into turn one, and Anthony in the end has to go a little bit deeper as he comes through the corner. He doesn't get the cutback successfully, and Taylor holds firm. Matthew Chris behind, just watching on. And of course the top 5 in the elite class only separated by 7 seconds from lead to crisp. So indeed this battling here will push the rear 3 further away from your leader, and Grebstad starting to just put a little bit of distance between P3 downwards. So for Grebstad, I think he'll feel comfortable with the strategy, but he won't feel comfortable with the fact that Daniel Lee, of course the man who's able to find any which way to save fuel, protect the tyres of the Ferrari, well now he's 3 seconds clear, almost 4 seconds clear, and not showing any signs of being reeled on in. So this could be Daniel Lee's race to lose at this current point in time, but of course we can't predict anything as Taylor here continues to hold Anthony at bay. But Sight Anthony definitely now starting to build a case of momentum, as we saw Jacko Taylor at the end of the first stint really putting the pressure on. It's a different attitude here from Jacko Taylor, and I wonder if the TE6 Car Marte driver may be thinking about changing strategies and has decided he's done enough now to play a bit more of a conservative strategy, and perhaps 2-stop is the way to go here for the 115 Audi driver, and he's going to try and push for it as he heads down towards Le Mans corner once more. But meanwhile, Matthew Chris behind, with the 97 driver here really playing a enigma of a game. We saw such a strong qualifying performance, but now the pace just not there. But again, I think this is all about him back in the car to be conservative and just watching on and trying to save as much fuel as possible. But I wonder if he's backed it off just a little bit too much here. A Sight Anstey all over the back of Jacko Taylor as they head down Allman. Looks up the inside. He's going to be firmly alongside of the braking. Taylor will carry the speed round, but Sight Anstey will have the authority to the apex. And as they come out, I think Anstey's got it done. Taylor tries to get back in the tire immediately here, back onto the throttle. It's going to be turbo-powered V8 of the Ferrari versus what is the V10 of the Audi. And as they head up towards turn number 1, Taylor looks to the inside. Sight Anthony this time not having to worry about the pressure. And as they come through the left-hander, gets it done to take P3. Taylor's still there though as they come up towards turn 3, but can't find the move. But meanwhile, in a dramatic twist further down the order, Frank Klein going very slowly there, coming out of Le Mans corner and head down the Allman straight now, build up speed. But the TE6 Sport Corporate driver has dropped the lead of the AM class, and now it's Michael Warrington the leads. But let's take a look at what exactly happened to Frank Klein. So making his way out through 15 and into Le Mans at 16, onto the brakes he went, and I think this may be a run deep of the car. No, in fact, just too much power on corner exit there, and the car unsettled on the rear end, and it went on round to the tyre barrier, and that knock to the tyre barrier will definitely wound your straight line speed, but then pointing the wrong way, he's just had to hold the brakes and let the field on through before finally getting the car turned around. But that's dropped him all the way down from what was P12 overall to P21 overall, dropped to the P5 in the AM class and the leader set class. Meanwhile, now your class leader in the AMS is Michael Warrington. The TE6 Car Marte driver will find himself back in the lead of the race. Indeed, led laps earlier on in the season, and now back up at the top there in the number 31 Ferrari as he heads up towards turn number 10. But just in front, we continue to see the rivalry between Nathan Scott and David Larson, and Nathan Scott not able to break away. Larson right there with him all the way on around. And I think for Larson at this point in time, he's now having to really come to a decision. Does he want to try to effect a pass, or does he just want to run close behind? But the problem with this is Dion Red has slashed that gap from 5 seconds to now just under 3 as he heads out to turn at 13 and down towards Le Mans corner they charge. And John Eddowes a further 4 seconds behind. The pro class is starting to bunch up here, and we could see a four-way fight for the win. As they inch closer and closer at every corner and lap turned. Meanwhile, we look back to that battle for P3 in the elite class. It's Sight Anthony after making the move on Jacko Taylor. Seems to be clear. Meanwhile, Taylor, by comparison, now with Chris behind. But Crisp again just staying there, looming as an ever-present threat. And I think for Crisp, all the fuel saving he's doing right now, if it plays out and everybody else is having to take one more pit stop compared to him, then Crisp will have got this started in terms of strategy. Come the final stint of this race, he'll look a lot more comfortable as they head on through at turn number 5 and up towards 7. The question you may be asking at this point is, how can we expect those pit stops to play if it's a 2 versus a 3 stop? Well, in terms of the 2 stoppers, we would expect the next pit stop to be around the 55-minute mark. But meanwhile, Chris there looking to try and make a stop to Taylor's progress, but as they come out to 7 up the inside, no potential move there for Crisp in the end. He got a nose alongside, but not enough to force Taylor to back off the throttle corner exit. But Crisp now, I think, trying to say to Taylor, look, you need to get a move on because I've got other plans strategy-wise. And as they come into turn number 10, we ride on board here, Matthew Crisp, as he heads up towards Town Corner. Now, coming back to our point from only moments ago, our 2 stoppers would expect their next pit stop to be around the 55-minute mark, perhaps extending to 60 to 63 minutes into the race. Meanwhile, for our 3 stoppers, well, they can play it one of 2 ways. We saw at Magny-Cours our 3 stoppers make the second stop at the same time as our 2 stoppers, and then the final stop was within the final 10 minutes of the race, just have that quick splash and dash of fuel to get to the end. Conversely, we may see here today a bit more of a split on the strategy. Perhaps we will see the second stop around the 50-minute mark and then the final stop with 15 minutes remaining just to break the race up. But either way it's played at this point for our drivers, of course, with the Sebring circuit being quite aggressive but the track temperature being quite low. Therefore, it really does put a big question mark over the strategy. And of course, we're not expecting our drivers to change their tyres more than once. If they do, with tyre changes being possible at the same time as fuel going into the car, and therefore they can split the tyre change over the pit stops so as not to lose as much time. Well, tyres are going to be a big factor here as well as the fuel. And as Chris makes his way down towards turn 1 here, we continue to ride on board, and you can see that gap stabilising at 4 tenths. But Chris definitely showing to Taylor that he's not just going to sit there and be a pretty face in the rearview mirror. He's also there to pose a threat as they head into turn 3. And notice how tight the road surface is there, and the number of drivers have already taken some grass back onto the circuit where they put a tyre onto the grass on the right side of the entry of turn number 3, and that can catch a driver out if they're not careful. But Chris falling back a little bit there and decides to back the tempo off. As meanwhile, speaking of drivers who are not backing off at any point, Dion Wren here now got Stephen Masters right behind him, and this will be for overall position as Alex Hill is in the pit lane and also Brock Freights. Alex Hill is coming from P12 in the elite class, P18. Brock Freights from P3 in the AM class, and as he drops down the order there, this could be the sign of our 3 stoppers of when that second pit stop is coming in. So our prediction of being around the 50-minute mark may be coming true here, and we could now start to see who is on the more aggressive strategy. Well, as all the drivers head on around, of course, they won't want to reveal their hands until they absolutely have to. You can imagine this is like a game of poker or chess, if you will, a hybrid of the two, where nobody wants to reveal the cards they've brought to the table in terms of the race, and everybody wants to keep one another guessing. But there is a point where you do have to reveal what your strategy is. But the name of the game, typically, if you can, is to go as deep as possible into each stint, and therefore keep your rivals wondering what exactly you're doing. You may not gain in terms of positions initially, but if you are in a 2-stop and you go incredibly deep on that second stint, and then the third stint is going to look very favourable for yourself and everybody else is on a 3-stop by comparison. Alternatively, they've had to pit very early and that final stint is an extended one. But as we do look back to Nathan Scott here, we can see still being hounded by Lois, and Lois the closest he's been for some time, as into the pit lanes comes Daniel Lee and also Håkon Grebstad. Well, also we see Cy Anthony and Jacko Taylor in. And Chris stays out as they make their second pit stops of today. And well, we could see here Scott and Larson coming on in, giving the form. Ryan Moles also stays out, interestingly enough, and he was one of the earlier drivers to pit on the first stint. So this means we are seeing a shake-up in the elite class in terms of those strategies. Scott here defending into Sunset Bend, and as they come around, they've got the AM leader of Michael Warrington just behind them. But Scott there just tiptoed his way out of the corner. So David Larson will take the lead of the pro class for the first time today, as the Civinet Esports white driver charges across the timeline. He's going to go at least one more lap longer compared to Scott, and to be fair, he's earned the right to, given the amount of short shifting he's had to do behind Nathan Scott over the last couple of laps. It's stayed so close. But as he heads down towards turn number 3, meanwhile making the way out of the pit lane, well, there's Ryan Moles and Coleman Work stays out, but Daniel Lee heads on through, and we'll look at Håkon Grebstad behind. We can see there the two will close right back up after the first round of pit stops. Now the second round is complete, and its gap that's been brought down dramatically. with Lee's pit stop time there being identical to Grebstad, but Lee taking a further 3 seconds in the pit lane. It was a very slow exit for Lee, and now Grebstad all over the back of him, and that gap that Lee had built up on the second stint has been completely neutralised. As they head down into turn at number 7, onto the brakes they go. Grebstad right there as we jump on board with the McLaren MP412C. Uses that bi-turbo V8 versus the turbo-powered V8 Ferrari as they head up towards turn at number 10 via Fangio. And as both drivers there, nose to tail, well, I think Lee will be trying to encompass the spirit of the famous Ferrari driver of Manuel Fangio as they make their way through turn at number 10 and head up towards turn at number 13. But as the drivers head up towards turn number 13 now, you can see the lead defending initially into the Kinker 12, but Grebstad will want that. He'll want Lee to come off racing line. He'll want to get in his rival's head, try and get him unsettled as they head down towards turn at number 15 here. Both drivers pushing on. Lee looking fast on the straight runs, but meanwhile Grebstad looking absolutely visceral through the corners as he takes plenty of apex there at turn 15. Got to be careful not to cut it too much, as always he'll get a slowdown. But Lee goes a bit deep there at the wrong corner, and this is what Grebstad will want as he gets on the power nicely here, and Lee will be defenceless surely as they head on down Ullman. They battle their way up towards Sunset Corner. Grebstad goes around the outside here. He's got a nose ahead already. Lee's going to stay on the inside as much as he can. Grebstad 75% clear, and as he turns on in, Daniel Lee has to back off, and this could be a return to the de facto lead for Grebstad, albeit Matthew Crisp has stayed out for another lap. And as they head down towards turn number 1, across the timeline, we'll definitely know who are on the strategy that Grebstad and Lee are running in terms of what may be a 2 into 3 stop here. Well, Grebstad now your leader of that strategic pack, but as we see Si Anthony following them on through, we see Nathan Foster just behind, and Nathan Foster yet to take his second stop. And I wonder if the Newman Racing Blue driver here is perhaps trying to outwit everybody by running a very gradual 2-stop, because we saw him be nowhere on the pace compared to his peers, losing 2 seconds a lap on average. But perhaps that's what it takes in the Porsche to do the 2-stop, as he has caught right back up to his back. And right now, with Jacko Taylor behind him and Ryan Moles a little bit further back, well, Nathan Foster is gaining race time here, should that strategy be playing out the way we predict it is. Meanwhile, looking to David Lawson, well, since taking his second pit stop, he has jumped into the lead of the Pro Class, and Nathan Scott, who's a second behind. And I think Lawson there being able to take track position to wrap up his second stint by just delivering one more lap. Lawson needed it to put him was effectively a qualifying lap, come into the pit and retake the lead of the race there after what was a rather dicey strategic call. But as he heads down towards turn at number 7, we see Dion Wren only now 2 seconds off the battle for the lead of the Pro Class, and John Eddowes a further 3 seconds back. They're all coming together, and Crisp is into the pit lane as well. As our drivers head on around here and we head towards the final third of this race very gradually, well, we do look to Crisp in the pit lane, and you can see here, well, right now this will feel like his life depends on it in terms of this pit stop, as he'll be hoping that this strategy has played out the way he's wanted it to. Up onto the jacks there for Crisp. Meanwhile, Håkon Grebstad heading on down the back straight, as we see that is, I do believe, Nathan Foster having a slowdown on the run out of turn 16, and as they make their way through turn 17, Foster will lose the place to Jacko Taylor. It's going to put a dent in his race speed, but Grebstad here holding that lead behind. And we can see Chris coming off the jacks there, but as they make the way in towards turn number 1, will it be Crisp ahead or will it be Grebstad? It'll be Grebstad as Lee comes on through as well. Si Anthony, meanwhile, comes on through the opening corner. Chris down the outside on the pit exit line, and Si Anthony just about avoids what could have been a detriment to his race. We're coming up behind Chris. He just about gets back ahead, but Chris, of course, will immediately go on the offensive here. And it was so close to jumping the privateer, and well, they're all on the same number of pit stops then, that Chris will know that this has not worked out in his favour, and Si Anthony has got the job done to hold on to P3. As he heads down towards turn number 7 once more, we see a bit further behind Nathan Foster now on the rear of Jacko Taylor, albeit I think he'll be grateful for the tow, and Nathan Foster yet to take his second pit stop, so he'll be looking to try and get to the 60th minute before taking his second of what we would expect would be his final pit stop of the day. But given the amount of time they're spending in the pit lane currently, well, with that pit stop in mind, it would mean that Nathan Foster on that second stop could come out your leader when the third stop occurs. as he heads into turn number 7 at the moment. We've still got a lot of mathematics to go. In fact, turn number 10 there, we should correct ourselves, and we can see a number of you cheering on Matthew Crisp in the YouTube chat, including Alex Johnson. They're saying, let's go Crispy. But as they come charging on around here, well, Håkon Grebstad is your leader at the moment, but again, we do have a question mark whether Matthew Crisp may be on a 2-stop here, whereas everybody else in front of him could be on an aggressive 3-stop. And then we also have Nathan Foster, who 10 seconds off the leaders is on a confirmed 2-stop as we understand it. And if things carry on and he doesn't make any errors, he could be right now the surprise leader of this race come the end if all the time is played out in fashion. But as you can see there, looking back to Nathan Foster, holding the inside line here before weaving back onto the racing line. He knows that he is on the different strategy compared to Moles and company, and therefore he doesn't want anybody to gain time on it. He knows that race time is pivotal now, and he just needs to stick to his guns. Meanwhile, looking back to your leaders, Håkon Grebstad holding on Daniel Lee all over the back of him as they head through turn number 1. We ride on board the gearbox here on the McLaren MP412C, and as they come out of turn 1, Lee gets a brilliant run off the corner, heading up towards turn 3 on the inside. Grebstad gives it the space here. It's going to get very tight through turn 4. Lee looks for the move on the inside. He can't quite find it into turn 5, and Grebstad faces the test and folds it off there. But as he makes his way through the big bend, he'll now know that both of them are in a deadlock here in terms of battling hard for that lead, and it's going to cost them overall time. And I'm not sure if they're aware of the risk of Chris, but also the risk of Foster. But the more they battle now, the more they're at risk of costing themselves an opportunity to take the win here today. As Sight Anti looms large in the background as well. And as they head up towards turn number 10. Meanwhile, we look from them as they come charging past the apex curve. Their beautiful camera angle to give you a sense of the speed. We look back to Nathan Scott, who was chasing after David Larson. The gap between him and the pro leader, 7/10 still. Well, now he's got the question of Stephen Masters behind, and Masters continue to pile on the pressure as they head up towards turn 7 themselves. Meanwhile, in the AM class, we see Adrian Kukulis here continue to try and chase down what is P2 in the AM class after Brock Freight and the Porsche 911 GT3 R-Drive there with Freight making an error. This could be an opportunity. We've got a car off there, and that is Jack Bullen, who's parked up on the apex of turn number 6. He's got it rolled corner exit. Kukulis here looking around the outside. It's going to be a battle on the brakes. We know the brakes on Porsche very strong, but the Ferrari no slouch either. And as they exit the corner, Freight gets it parked to the apex there and simply says it's one wide here and you're going to have to accept it. And Kukulis now tucking back in and looking for the move potentially towards the end of the lap. But heading up towards turn 10, where can Kukulis really go for the move, given the straight line speed differential? I think for him, it's all about that run to turn 7 and also keeping at Freight under pressure. Freight's really struggling. In fact, goes wide there at turn 11 and Kukulis gets on through and in the end makes the move nicely, and Freight's been pressured into an error, and now Kukulis in P2. He'll know it's a 13-second gap to Michael Warrington, and well, Kukulis over the last couple of laps has been matching the pace of Warrington. We could see Kukulis here charge for a late win in this race, but he's going to have to definitely start to nail the laps, because whilst he still does have 32 minutes plus the final lap to go, it sounds like a long time, but in practice it's really not. When the average lap time is 2 minutes, which means that our drivers have only got a grand total, if you do the maths, 16 to 17 laps remaining. But meanwhile, into the pit lane here for his second and what is likely his final stop, Nathan Foster comes on in, and well, now the elite driver will be hoping that everything he's gambled has been worth it. And I can tell you, when you're in this scenario, when you're the driver on the other strategy, you've been on the strategy for so long, we'll suspend that thought, ladies and gentlemen, because here, Crispin Anthony battling hard through turn number 9 and up towards 10. It's Anthony on the inside, defending hard here, looking for the defense on Crisp, and as they head out to 10 and up towards 13, Crisp really putting the pressure on and now trying to find his way up for, I think, Matthew Crisp realising here that Sight Anthony is slowing down his overall race time, and as they come out to turn number 13, we're hearing that Agent Kukulis has been involved in an incident that's dropped him a long way down the order. But as we continue to focus on the battle for P3, Crisp looking for a move. He couldn't quite find it this time, but as they head up towards turn number 13 now, well, number 27 driver here is Sight Anthony, knowing that the pressure is on, and the more these two battle, the more time they lose to the leaders. They're heading out of Le Mans corner and onto the Allman Straight. Of course, Crisp here only has one thing in mind, which is he wants to get this move done sooner rather than later. but the pressure continues, and behind them they do have Jacko Taylor, who's 3.5 seconds off James Connolly, a lap down between them, the P8 AM driver. But as they head into Sunset Bend, Chris just waited a moment. Meanwhile, we look back up to your leaders here as Lee versus Grebstad. They head down towards turn number 1. Grebstad defending on the inside. Lee having the run on the outside here, covered off by Grebstad. He switches back to the inside, a very late switch back, and goodness me, with Daniel Lee is looking there to balance the car on eggshells. He's doing a brilliant job for the simple reason the 108 driver there switching back to the inside. I thought the car was going to go round there, the full confidence and the ability for the car to stay planted, and well, I'm not sure how much rear wing he's running, but enough rear wing there to let the car wobble. And as they head out of turn 5 through 6 right now, Daniel Lee really trying to get under the skin of Grebstad, but Grebstad showing just as much candour with regards to keeping that defensive pressure, breaking the way into turn 7. Lee looking up the inside but too far back to capitalise. Meanwhile, Dion Wren here finding himself in a difficult situation. He can see Nathan Scott in P2 in the Pro Class in front of him. Of course, Reddy in P3 in said class, but between the two of them, Stephen Masters and the elite driver here acts as a little bit of buffer with 30 minutes to go, and all of them on what we suspect is the free stop as they head out to turn number 5 and up towards 7 they charge. Well, now for Red, it's all about trying to knock on the door of Stephen Masters and get his way on through to go hunting after the win in the Pro Class here as they head up towards turn number 7 once more. But as they break the way down, meanwhile we look from them back up to Grebstad versus Lee, and Lee all over the back of his McLaren rivals. The Indian Motorsport McLaren continues to try and keep the privateer Ferrari at bay. Well, heading on through turns 15 into 16. Ben Watkinson there steering clear and taking the runoff space in order to respect the blue flags. Good awareness from Watkinson and the RSR Motorsport driver as they make the way down the Allwood straight here. Grebstad still ahead, 3/10 is the gap this time as they get ready to battle to the brakes into Sunset. We've seen Lee be so strong through this final corner. Grebstad no slouch by comparison, but going a little bit deep there, Lee, and looking for the cutback to that late apex. Gives a really strong run out the corner. Grebstad meanwhile keeping the speed, but you can see Lee there with that alternative line, just able to get within 1.5 tenths by the time they cross the timeline. And as they head up towards turn number 1, Lee right than the wheel tracks of Grebstad, but not able to find a way through this time either as they head up towards turn number 3. But we look back for the gearbox here on Grebstad, the Indian Motorsport machine, and that Ferrari with its headlights looking very menacing as they head through turns 3 into 5. Now, of course, here with all the pressure being mounted on, Lee will be giving it everything. He'll also be trying to do a bit of fuel saving in turn where he knows the move's not possible. But meanwhile, whilst this is going on, we're hearing that Dion Wren has been involved in a bit of an instant further on back. And in fact, Dion Wren, well, it's gone all wrong at turn number 17 here for the privateer. And we do have a quick replay of what's happened to the pro driver. Well, this was in the run down towards Sunset Bend, under braking. And the rear of the car starting to step out there as he began the transition towards the apex wall. And well, with tyre wet, John Eddowes there to back the car off and just avoid the contact with Red. But the 45 driver, after pushing for so long and so hard, the car's come unstuck, and as a result, he's now got it all to do again. But from P4 in the Pro Class, now 11.5 seconds off your leader in the Pro Class, and David Lowerson. Eddowes up into P3 in the class and continue to chase down the leaders little by little. But as we return to live pictures and we look back to Cy Anstey. Cy Anstey off circuit there, and that is at what is turn number 13 at Tower Corner. Cy Anstey for a rare mistake, and Chris moves up another position, and Chris now has an opportunity to chase down Grebstad and Lee for the win of this race, albeit as he comes through Le Mans corner. Grebstad and Lee continue to fight, and therefore they may push themselves back towards Chris sooner than they realise, as the 97 BMW driver here looking very fast when he's in clear air. But as he heads up towards turn at number 17, will still plenty of time for him to go given the relative delta to the top two. And as we see the top two coming out of the final corner here once more, they go on to what is a 30-second lap under race conditions. They've still got the best part of what is another 13 laps remaining, or 14 depending on how the laps work out. But Grebstad here under huge pressure to hold on to lead as he goes deep into turn 1, and Daniel Lee retakes the lead of this race. The pressure in the end too much for Grebstad at that moment in time, and just running a little bit too deep, but not too costly there, and Lee will know it's only temporary. He'll only now have a 1 second advantage to Grebstad, but he'll take every millisecond he can as he makes his way up towards turn 7 here, knowing how close the competition is. But as they head up towards turn number 7, meanwhile down in P11 in the elite class, and the driver who we have to keep in mind as we should give you a quick update to say we have had the retirement in the elite class of Carl McGurk, who you can see they're listed in P12. Nathan Foster, the Sebring Racing Blue driver, on the two-stop strategy. He's 1 minute and 13 seconds off of the leaders in the elite class. Given their final pit stop be significantly shorter, I think for Nathan Foster, he may not be in contention for the win, but he will definitely be in contention for a higher placement inside that top 10, and looking at the heels of the top 5 potentially, depending on how it plays out. As he makes his way out of the final quarter here and across the timeline very shortly, he'll now know and believe that his strategy will be the right one for the day, but he's got a long way to go here on this two-stop if he wants to make it succeed. Meanwhile, looking back to your pro leaders here, David Larson continued to hold off Nathan Scott as they make their way up towards turn number 10 again onto the brakes. Stephen Masters still behind them, the elite driver, just watching this one with the ultimate view on board of his Ferrari. But as we see Larson here continue to confound Scott, I think Scott at this time just not quite pushing the pace anymore and deciding he may want to do this in terms of less time in the pit stop strategy. But as we do take a brief sip of water there and continue to watch the Sebring Racing Blue driver press on, we do also see a little bit further down there a bit of a change of placement for Simon Hartley, who's now moved up to P7 in the AM class, albeit some slight connectivity issues there. The TE Corporate driver, I think, just trying to bring the car on home to the end of this race. The number 99 BMW definitely has been a couple of its fair share of incidents. James Conley just behind, with Ben Watkinson a lap down behind him, albeit they are P8 and P10 in the class respectively, but on alternative laps and therefore not battling one another as they head into the opening corner. Conley there in a Ferrari that has had to have some repair work done to it. You can see the damage on the right side of the car where they've had to put some of the side all back on the car, and as he makes his way into turn 13, it's at the side area, we should say, the side skirt, and as he comes through 5 now, well, he will have a little bit of pressure potentially building later on. But speaking of pressure here, Ben Watkinson may think he's under pressure with P11 in class driver Darren Sharples behind him, and the RSR privateer here will take solace in the fact that Sharples is a lap down on him and therefore not putting up as much pressure as perhaps he would be concerned about, as Watkinson goes very hot there into turn 7, missing his braking point and taking evasive action, and that's not the way I wanted to do it, but thankfully he gets to use the runoff area there in order to keep the car safe, and as he brings it back together, not the mistake he wanted, as meanwhile into the pit lane for his third and final stop from P4 in the pro class, Dion Wren, and this may be the signal for our free stoppers to very shortly start to make the way on in. With things calming down for a brief moment here, it is the calm before the storm, and we are waiting to see now who will be the first one to trigger off the last round of pit stops and where our two stoppers. We know that it is Nathan Foster's on the two stop, and also Matthew Crisp may potentially be on a two stop, but we think it may be more of a three stop given his relative pace in the field. Well, if any of our two stoppers are to capitalise, and then where our three stoppers will fit back into the overall strategic formation when we head on to that final stint. But Larson here continues to lead the pro class by that grind advantage, now 1.1 seconds over Scott, and I think Scott definitely changing tack now, and the Sebring Racing Blue drive focusing more on what he can do on that final pit stop and how he can gain on strategy. And looking at the circuit map there, I think if Nathan Scott were to come in at this point in time, it may be the best time to do so. He would find himself a bit of clear space on circuit, given the fact he's got quite a margin appearing between the field that is closing up on one another very gradually in the battle from P2 down to P6 from Freights through to Klein. And in fact, speaking of Brock Freights, here is the Tiki Sport driver as he comes on through turns of 15 into 16, really running the race for P2 downwards, with Michael Warrington 15 seconds up the road and showing no signs of giving up that race lead at any point. And as Freights heads down the Auckland Straight, we look back to Mark Johnson in the UKSimRacing Mercedes that's definitely seen a little bit of everything this season. It's seen highs, it's seen lows, but it's seen another high today as the Mercedes driver, currently P3 in the AM class, continue to charge on, with Casper Brotner not closing on him and falling backwards in P4 behind as Johnson comes on through at Sunset Bend, and then Brotner following him through in the old duty cars machine as number 14 driver here. Well, it has been an eventful start to this race. Indeed, perhaps not the way he wanted it to go, but he is gradually bringing himself back into the hunt, albeit the relative pace between himself and Johnson, it is going the way of Johnson at this time, who has continued to open up that advantage in P3. As Brotner comes down through turn number 1, heads up towards turn 3, it does give us a moment to take a look back up towards the front of the field and to Daniel Lee, your elite leader. As we see here, the privateer runs a little bit wide out of the Mont corner. That's not going to cost him too much time, and in fact over the last couple of laps, open up that advantage to Håkon Grebstad, now up to 3 seconds. With Grebstad having a brief off track that's cost him a bit of time, but as they head up towards the final 20 minutes of this race, Lee looking to be in control here, and I think he could be on course to bring home his maiden win of the season in the season finale. And of course he talked up the fact that he was looking forward to the season finale, and also in the Ferrari, the driver always looking to make it work on strategy, but he's brought the perfect combination today, both strategy, setup and pace with it. And indeed we saw in Brazil, just the setup of the car was not the setup that he needed, but here it definitely looks to be a car that is in control, and both car and driver are in harmonisation, and when you're in that zone nobody can stop you. But meanwhile, as we look back to Nathan Scott, in fact jump on board with the P2 pro driver here on board in the Lamborghini Huracan Evo from Sebring Racing Blue. You can see they're staying close to Larson as we hear that Simon Hartley's into the pit lane from P7 in the AM class. Nobody else in the pits at the moment, and therefore we are still waiting for the trigger to be pulled on our final stops for our drivers here, as we are expecting the vast majority will need to make that third stop, given we did see the second stop occur around the 50 to 55 minute mark, as Ben Watkinson there running wide at turn 1, but Nathan Scott, after getting close to Larson, falling back off the leader in the pro class here, and I definitely think Scott needs to be considering now when does he pit, given that Larson just seemingly taking off the front end of this Lamborghini's downforce, and therefore frustrates him a little bit as he continues to watch on. As they head up towards turn at number 7, shortly onto the brakes here. Scott will have a strategy in mind, but what is the strategy is the question. Is he going to try and go longer than Larson and try to out-survive him on track, and perhaps play on the idea that Larson would come out in traffic on pit exit, or will it be for Nathan Scott? He just feels as though he's got the stronger pace when he's got the clear air. Coming through at turn number 10 here, they do have Martin Tilling just up the road, and Tilling matching them for pace at this time. In fact, Nathan Scott the fastest of the trio here, and therefore arguably it would be the driver in clear air to be starting to open up a little bit of an advantage as he collects the curve there at turn number 13. Got to be careful of that, of course. One will hit it too hard successfully, as otherwise the front and right suspension will start to suffer as a result. But as he comes through turn number 14 and into the braking zone for the first part of Le Mans, with Scott here just very comfortable as he heads towards the end of this lap. They're heading on down and around. Meanwhile, we look back to Nathan Foster, the other Sebring Racing Blue driver, recently passed there by Frank Klein in the Tiki Simsport BMW M4, and Foster of course committed to that 2-stop, albeit it does look as though here the 52 driver continues to go backwards rather than forwards, and maybe with that as the 2-stop not the ideal strategy in the long-term evaluation. But as he heads up towards 13, of course he can't think about that right now. He's got to think he's done it right in terms of picking his strategy, and time will be the big factor that tells us whether it was right. But as he heads down through Bishop Border, falling down to what is P20 overall, and definitely have to run a long way off the pace in order to be able to find the fuel to get to the end of the race unscathed in terms of capacity over that one less stop. Heading through the right hander there of turn number 16 into the pits comes Alex Hill. He makes his way from P10 in the elite class and what is P14 overall. As we also see into the pits there, Brock Freites comes in from P2 in the AM class, and I think this could be the signal for those third and final pit stops. The majority of our drivers, as Mark Johnson also comes in there. Everybody else stays on out, but Johnson coming in early, and that will release Adrian Kukulas up towards P4 and P3 in fact in the AM class, as Kukulas comes on through here in the 917 Porsche to try and push on for a podium finish in that said AM class. But as he heads up towards turn number 3, he'll know now that he's got to absolutely go from Castle Bronner, only 2 seconds up the road. He won't feel the dirty air too much this time, but he has got to really get a move on in order to make the strategy work. Now heading on out to turn number 5, a little bit of a slide there, quarter exit. Of course, the tyres starting to show some wear. Degradation picking up as he heads through into turn number 7. And with just over 15 minutes left in this race, as we say hello to Murray Luca there. Good evening to you, Murray. Hope you're doing well. And we see Kukulas here just keeping it calm, as meanwhile Daniel Lee's into the pits, and the Håkon Grebstad's in as well. It is pit stop time for our leaders. It's the third and final stop. Sight Anthony in. Meanwhile, Matthew Crisp goes on through to retake the lead, but we do wonder if he's got one more pit stop to go, and if so, how soon will he do it as he heads around to go on to what is his 37th lap. We've got Jacko Taylor and Sean Valendia also in the pit lane. What about Martin Tiller as he comes up towards the final quarter? Ryan Moles goes long as well. He goes an extra lap in the Protect Motorsport Audi, but as Tilling comes into the pits here, clearing what is there, James Conley. Meanwhile, in the race to be the fastest out of the pit lane, we can see Daniel Lee leaving his pit box, and right behind is Håkon as they head on down. Science a little bit further back as we jump on board with Håkon. The frustration here is the fact he still has not been able to make it work, and Grebstad, by comparison, a second faster in terms of his stationary pit time, but losing out on pit exit. Under braking they go, but there's a lot of traffic ahead of them. James Conley there, well, he's got nowhere to go, and Grebstad at the back of the car. I don't think Grebstad expected to close up that rapidly, under braking into turn 3, and it caught the Indian Motorsport driver out. No contact between them, but you can imagine Grebstad there will be absolutely fuming for the simple reason I think he all felt as though this was the perfect time to catch up, and then suddenly it came too soon. But of course they've still got time to go. As David Larson, your pro leader, is ahead of John Eddowes from P3 in the pro class, has just exited the pit lane with Dion Wren further behind. Nathan Scott, meanwhile, also taking his pit stop. So Larson, the only pro driver yet to take his final pit stop of the day. And could Larson potentially prove to be a little bit of a cork in the bottle here for Daniel Lee, who just wants to break away? As they make the way through turn 11 and up towards 13, you can see Lee, they're going a little bit deep through 12, and they're onto the brakes, and as they come through the right-hander and Tower Corner, well, meanwhile in the M class, Casper Brotner leaving the pit lane. Brock Craze jumps up to P3 in the class, but Grebstad here we continue to ride on board with as he looks to hunt down Daniel Lee. Both drivers here, of course, will have enough fuel to get to the end. They'll be pushing all the way now. Lee will be focusing on holding that track position as much as he can, and Grebstad will want to get things done sooner rather than later as they head onto the Auburn Straight here, and Lee with the distant tire Larson should be safe for the run up towards Sunset Bend this time around. Apparently wound down Moles in the pit lane from P2. He'll drop him a long way down the order compared to the top two battle, but as Grebstad here breaks his way to Sunset Bend, takes a tighter entry line, but the car wanders a little bit deep. Lee gets the better exit as a result, as now Grebstad starts to build the speed, but Lee there had to back the throttle off, almost making contact with the wall, and with that mistake this is going to be Grebstad's opportunity as he powers up for the gearbox. Up to 5th gear he goes, he looks for it but he can't quite find it, and as they head through turn number 1, and well now he has to wait as they head up towards 3, and well of course last time when they exited the pit lane at this very corner it almost ended in tears on a pair of them, but Grebstad's quick thinking stopped it from happening, and now as they make the way towards turn number 5, Lee holds firm. Meanwhile, Sean Valandia comes on outer turn. In fact, comes on out of what is turn number 1, and up towards 3 he goes and holds off Ryan Moles as he looks up the inside of what is there Jack Bullen as Moles that comes out in P7. But Matthew Crisp, of course, the big question mark, where does he fit into the picture, as we can confirm that Nathan Foster's 2-stop has left him down in P10. 1 minute off of the run, in fact 30 seconds we should really say, off of the leaders who've taken the 3-stop so far. So therefore for Nathan Foster it has not worked out on the 2-stop, but as we see at Valandia here continue to hold off Moles. Now it's going to be a sprint to the finish. Meanwhile between Brotner and Johnson here, both on the 3-stop, and Johnson gets ahead of Brotner down the Auburn Straight, covers it off into Sunset Bend, and well the Mercedes will struggle there for front end rotation as they head through 17, but as they power out there's a little bit of snap oversteer there on return to power for Johnson, but he catches the car in time, and Casper Brotner not able to find a way to get alongside of the run to turn 1. So now for Johnson it's P4 currently with Adrian Kukulis 2 seconds up the road, and in fact as Kukulis makes his way up to speed here, the privateer has re-emerged from the pit lane. P3 in the AM class, he's made the strategy work to jump ahead of Johnson and Brotner. Now can he keep it that way with a 6-second gap to Freight, and then it's a further 20 seconds to Michael Warrington. But as the AM leaders make the way on around and the battle for P3 in the AM class begins to boil, we look back to the battle for the lead of the pro class, and you can see that Nathan Scott here now the best part of 3 seconds off of David Larson, and it would seem that Larson has timed this strategy to perfection because they've all made their final stops of the day that are scheduled, and now for Nathan Scott he's got a huge deficit to try and overturn, and David Larson has played this absolutely perfectly in the 306 machine, whereas he heads on down the Auburn Straight. Not to sing his praises too much, we don't want to give him the commentator's curse. There's only 11.5 minutes to go by the time he heads to the timeline, and he'll know now that destiny is firmly in his control in taking the win in the season finale. Well, he's got Martin Tilley in front, he's looking for the move here on the elite driver to take what is P8 overall, and as Larson comes out of the final corner we see Ben Watkinson into the pit lane from what is P10 in the AM class, but as they charge their way on down here, Larson continue to hound Tillin and wants to find a way on through, and I think very shortly he may have to force that move because he is now losing time, and Nathan Scott is closing up rapidly. Meanwhile, John Eddowes takes the fastest lap of the Pro Class race of 59.724 and is continuing to chase down Nathan Scott. 4 seconds is the gap. Heading his way up towards turn 3. Meanwhile, we look from them up to Daniel Lee, who holds the P2 as they make the way out of what is their turn number 11 and up to turn 13, and will lead right now 31 seconds off of Crisp. And will Crisp yet to come into the pits from 2 pit stops? And if Crisp is pulling a 2-stop here, I'll say this now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to eat my hat or anything along those lines, but Crisp has pulled off an absolute blind on the strategy. But as soon as I say that, he's into the pit lane to what looked to be going long on that second and third stop. In the end for Crisp, it's all ended coming into the pit lane here. And now where will he fit in versus Lee Grebstad? Because to put it in the picture, Håkon, Grebstad and Daniel Lee are halfway down Ullman, already heading up towards Sunset Bend. In fact, as we look back to them here, heading into turn 17, the 188 driver continues to charge as he rolls his way through the right-hander. Grebstad keeping him honest every step of the way as both drivers really pushing it, and Crisp already completed his pit stop, makes his way out, and this is going to be very close as they head on through. We look to the blimp camera here. Where's Lee? There he is, and we can see Chris coming out of the pit lane, and Chris comes right onto the back of this battle. We've got a three-way fight for the win right at the end. Chris has not jumped on strategy, but he's jumped right onto the back of this group, and therefore now for Matthew Crisp, who has been perhaps the fastest man on circuit all day today under race conditions. Jacko Taylor, of course, took pole position, but Crisp has been the man to beat in terms of one-lap pace, and now the trio are right together for the remainder of the time here. Meanwhile, David Larson all over the back. All that Martin Tillin there for overall position, but you can see Nathan Scott now only 2.5 seconds back and closing. Oh, goodness me, and what on earth happened there for David Larson? We've not seen anything like that. That looked as though Larson clipped off the barrier there. We'll have to take a look back very shortly, but Larson's race has completely unfolded there in late drama, and we get a replay of that. Was he made his way on down, nowhere near close to his rival in front, onto the brakes. Oh my goodness, and it's a hit to the wall for Larson there, just too close to the wall, and in the end clipping the barrier. And well, that was much more dramatic for the contact than it seemed to be, but the 70 Esports white Ferrari having its race ended there very late in the day, and it's disaster for Larson as we return to your live pictures there. And Larson, what was looking to be a comfortable ride to the end, has ended up retiring with only 10 minutes remaining, if that. But meanwhile, looking back to the battle for the lead of the elite class with Nathan Scott now your pro leader, and looking to be on course to take the win and add his name to the list of names in the pro class who've taken wins. Daniel Lee under pressure, and Håkon Grebstad looking around the outside into Sunset Bend. They make the way into the right-hander, and as they come on through here, well, you can see Grebstad goes very deep, and Crisp looks at a move up the inside, and he can't quite find it. He tries to get the cheeky nose in there, and Crisp immediately now going on the offensive 9. But every time that Grebstad goes deep into Sunset Bend or any corner to try and get the cutback, it's Crisp's space to try and capitalise, so they make the way into turn number 1. This is on to lap 41. They've got 8 minutes to go. It's a three-way fight for the elite and overall win. And as they break the way down to turn 3, Chris takes another look as we take a quick sip of water, ladies and gentlemen. Otherwise, I don't think my voice is going to take it anymore. As they head out of turn number 5 and up towards 7. Meanwhile, further behind, we do see Jacko Taylor continue to try to hunt down sight and stay in the battle for P4, with Sean at Valandi a bit further back, 9 seconds off of them as they make the way on down. So really our focus for the remainder of this race, ladies and gentlemen, with most of the battles now calming down, will be on this battle for the elite and over win to the finish. And as we ride on board the gearbox of Daniel Lee's Ferrari, or the 188 Ferrari right now, trying to keep the 37 McLaren honestly at bay, as behind Matthew Crisp has fallen off a little bit, but as he defends into turn 10, you see the Grebstad trying to tease out a cutback on the outside, can't quite find it, and instead has to stay right behind as they make the way out towards Tower Corner. Now, if you're in Daniel Lee's shoes, of course, this is where you really have to think about the long game. You have to try and make Grebstad not just stay behind, but push him backwards towards Crisp. We've already seen that Chris is very eager to make the move on Grebstad, but to the sunset bend, if Lee can get Chris back into this fight, then what he can do is potentially have to fight one another and end up giving himself a couple of seconds advantage, or even just a second, and it gives him potentially a whole lap worth of comfort to settle the car down. But as they all make the way onto the Allman straight here, you see all three drivers nailing their exit off of the corner, and as they power their way up towards turn number 17, well, now into sunset bend they go. Grebstad 2 attempts at closing here. Looks to the inside a little bit. You can see the difference in body language of the cars. Lee having to take a deeper run, but Lee loses it. The car snaps loose, and as he comes up free, catches the car in time. But with that, Håkon Grebstad goes on to take the lead of this race with only 6 minutes remaining. It's an unexpected error from Daniel Lee, and what was looking to be a potential run to a win, its maiden win of the season, has ended up unfolding at the last possible moment. As Håkon Grebstad now looks to try and make it another win in the book. Meanwhile, Matthew Crisp looking to make it back-to-back wins as he comes on through turn number 3. And that's a two-way fight for victory unless they battle one another hard enough to bring Daniel Lee back into the equation. But of course, Lee now will be worried about those rear tyres with that slide. It will, of course, the temperature spike, and therefore the tyres will no longer be in that comfort zone. But Crisp here will have to play patience. He will know that Grebstad will fight this hard as they come into turn 7. Of course, it's obvious on paper when you're battling for the win, but given the way the two battled one of the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit in round number 5, I would expect nothing less from the pair as it comes down to the final 5 minutes. And as they head through Fangio and up towards turn at number 10, well, where could Crisp look for the move? He'll know that he's got the speed on the straights in the BMW versus the McLaren, but he won't have the cornering necessarily. And as they come through turn 11 and up towards Tower Corner, they stay as they were for a brief moment. Meanwhile, we look back to Adrian Kukulis, who right now all over the back of Mark Johnson as they make the way around through turn number 17. And in fact, Kukulis has found his way past Casper Brotner quite recently, and as they make the way down, in fact, Mark Johnson has found his way past Kukulis. We must apologise there. It was a slowdown for Kukulis, we understand it, on the exit of turn 16 that's led to this. But that was in the battle for P3 in the AM class. Johnson now back on the podium. Meanwhile, as we hear that Frank Klein's into the pit lane for a late incident in the AM class for P6 in class. Meanwhile, we focus here on the elite lead battle as they head down Allman and up towards Sunset Bend. And Will Grebstad here already 2.5 tenths clear of Crisp as they head into the final corner here and go to what will be 3 laps remaining. In fact, it'll be 2 laps remaining as they come on around with less than 4 minutes to go. Will Grebstad there goes a little bit deep off of Apex. Meanwhile, Crisp ever close but not able to find the run. Well, now he will have an opportunity here in the tow as they power down 2 laps to go on to lap 43 of 44 laps that will be turned here. But as they come through turn 1, you can see Crisp so close to the back of Grebstad as they head up towards turn 3. Grebstad thinks about needing to defend. He doesn't in actuality, and we ride on board with Crisp here as he makes his way into turn 5. Now with the flames spitting and flickering off of the back of what is there, Grebstad's car. Meanwhile, further back in the battle for P4, Jacko Taylor has found his way past Sight Anthony into turn 1. We'll try and get a replay of that very shortly if we can. But meanwhile, here Chris looking for that potential move into turn 7. He goes very late on the brakes. He comes in from left field, and as he moves up the inside there, it's too wide in the run out of the hairpin, and Crisp shows the first sign of trying to make the move, albeit I think a bit unexpected. He couldn't quite make it count, but as they make the way out towards turn number 10, Grebstad there aware of it at the last moment, and Crisp looks again as they come into the right-hander. And as they come on out there, we say hello to Slash Noodles, who I think there makes a little bit of a correction to evening at wall as they head up towards turn number 13. But as Chris now rolls his way on through, powering out what it looks like the 97 driver here, doing everything in his power to keep close and really harry Grebstad. But Grebstad showing great awareness every step of the way. They head down towards turn number 15 here, but this is not the place to pass for Chris. He'll want to get the move out of 16 into Sunset Bend. Grebstad then going slowly off the corner, having a little bit of a wobble, and as they come through Le Mans, now 2 tenths separates the pair of them. Onto the throttle they go. This is Chris' opportunity. There'll be one more lap after this one, and as they power their way down the back straight here, the McLaren roars. It's the battle of the V8 versus the 6-cylinder 3-litre engine of the BMW. And as they head up towards turn 17 here, it's going to be a difference of lines. Chris goes deep. He looks at the cutback run here as they power their way out to Sunset. The checker flag will await them next time they come around as the white flag waves. One more lap to go here for the season finale conclusion, and as they head down towards turn 1, Grebstad defends hard. Chris looks around the outside here, 9, he's going to be made to go the long way round. They head into turn 1, Chris looks at a cutback run, Grebstad covers him off, they're parking on Apex. He'll see that Chris now tucks into the inside, Grebstad covers him off immediately. They bow into turn 3, and as they come up through the corner, rolling their way up towards turn 5, there's a stalemate for a brief moment. Chris knows he can't get on through, he has to wait now for turn 7, and of course Grebstad will be absolutely wary of what happened on the previous lap when Chris came roaring up the inside. But as they make their way out of Big Ben, onto the brake they go, and as they head on down, Grebstad returns to racing line. Chris looks up the inside, he tries to go for it, but this time Grebstad sees it's coming, brakes later, and as they make their way out to 7, now there's only a limited number of opportunities remaining. No further battles on circuit. Beyond what we can confirm is that Darren Sharples has found his way past David Lorison for overall position. But meanwhile, as we continue to watch the battle for the elite lead here, and indeed the overall win being at stake, Håkon Grebstad continues to hold on. The Indian Motorsport driver here, he's held off the barrage, the flurry of attacks from Matthew Crisp. There's only another, 4 corners remaining, but these are critical corners now. They'll know that any mistake could be deadly. And as they make their way down through Bishop Corner at turn number 14, we're heading up towards the right-hander that commences the Le Mans sequence here at turn 15. Grebstad's got a gap of 3 tenths here. He only needs to nail the exit of Le Mans, and it should be enough to the line. And coming on through the turn number 16 here, making his way on out. Grebstad right now hooks up nicely. The gap is 3.5 tenths. Does a little bit of a bob and weave there down the Ullman straight. And Chris, he's not close enough. The gap is 3.5 tenths. I think Grebstad's done it as they make the way up towards Sunset Bend. It's one final braking zone. It's the hardest corner on the circuit. Grebstad comes in hot. Chris there goes deep again. He looks to try and get the cutback run on corner exit. But as they make the way round, the checker flag awaits our drivers. And there can only be one winner. And it's Håkon Grebstad who takes the win in the end after 90 minutes of racing by 4 tenths over Matthew Crisp to take the elite win, followed up by Daniel Lee, who rounds off the elite podium ahead of Jacko Taylor and Cy Anthony. Further in the rear of the picture, you'll see there a bit further back as Sean Valandia takes P6 overall ahead of Ryan Moles, with Darren Sharples coming on through to take P24, P11 in the AM class, and as Moles crosses the timeline, we will then have to wait a little while before Martin Tilling comes on around. But first it'll be Simon Hartley who makes his way out of the final corner to take P6 in the AM class, will be P18 overall, but then finally Tilling emerges from the final corner for Tiki Simsport Corpa to take P8 in the elite class ahead of Nathan Scott, who finishes your winner in the pro class ahead of John Eddowes by 8 tenths at the end, and John Eddowes finishing P2 in the pro class will be your pro champion with the retirement of Peter Cox. He's done it, ladies and gentlemen, and Michael Warrington crosses the line to take the win in the AM class when it's all said and done today. A brilliant drive from Michael Warrington in exceptional circumstances, and then shortly it will be Brock Freights who comes on through and makes his way on around here to take P2 in the AM class, what will be P13 as he comes on around ahead of what will be Mark Johnson shortly. As the Tiki Simsport driver heads to the line, and then Mark Johnson for UKSimRacing rounds off the AM podium ahead of Adrian Kukulis, who just could not find a way back in the end in their battle. Casper Rotner finishes P5 in the AM class, P16 overall. As you see the old dudes in cars, Ferrari, they're crossing the timeline, and then we have a gap to Dion Wren, who despite it all will still come on home and finish P3 in the pro class, in on the bottom step of the podium in what wasn't to be his day today, despite moments of absolute brilliance from the Audi driver. And then shortly we'll see Ben Watkinson come to the timeline to finish P10 in the AM class, P23 overall. It hasn't been the best of drives for Ben Watkinson, but he's kept his head down, he's never given up, and he's enjoyed every moment of it as he crosses the line, and he'll be the last of our finishers on circuit, I do believe, as that concludes our racing, ladies and gentlemen, where we can see a number of our drivers decide to do donuts. John Eddowes parked up there. I don't think he can quite believe it right now that he's done it, and he's become our pro champion for season 9. And we can see there Michael Warrington, I think, out of fuel parking up, as meanwhile Ben Watkinson enjoyed doing some donuts there. The privateer, completely understandable. It has been a race to end the season. It has certainly been one of those, as we also see Dion Wren there deciding to remove the rear rubber of the car, and also taking a bit of the side quarter panel off of his car, and also what is there, the car of Casper Brotner. But as our drivers enjoy themselves on the finish line, and I think Adrian Kukulis there could not be happier with the way it's ended today. well, we do take a look at those race results subject to any stewards' inquiries. So we start off, of course, by taking a look at the overall results. And we go through the top 10 and then talk about the overall finishing positions for the class podium finishers. Håkon Grebstad, after 90 minutes of racing, takes the win overall in the elite class for Ignium Motorsport by 4 tenths in the end over Matthew Chris, the privateer there, P2. It came down to fine margins on the strategy and 1 lap pace, but it was Grebstad who managed to make it count today. Jacko Taylor finishing P3 there for TT Simsport Car Marte, and well, I do believe that Daniel Lee finished P3, but we seem to have had a little bit of a mix-up on our standings there, ladies and gentlemen. Daniel Lee now being listed as finishing P17. Not quite sure how that's happened, but Daniel Lee we crossed the line P3, so there has been something that's occurred. Perhaps it's a post-race penalty being applied, but according to our race results here, we have Jacko Taylor P3 overall ahead of Sight Anthony P4, the privateer, and then Sean Valandia completing the top 5 for Tiki Simsport Kimi. Ryan Moles P6 for Protect Motorsport, and with that result, it will not be enough to upset UKSimRacing taking the team's championship crown. Martin Tillin P7 there for Tiki Simsport Corpa, ahead of your pro winner Nathan Scott, the Sim Racing Blue driver, taking the class win there over Stephen Masters and John Eddowes, with John Eddowes completing the run to P2 in the pro class, and also the top 10 overall for Tiki Simsport Kimi. And with that finish, John Eddowes being our pro champion for season 9. Michael Warrington, best of the rest there, P11, your AM class winner for Tiki Simsport Car Marte today, ahead of Brock Freight and Mark Johnson, the Tiki Simsport and UK Sim Racing drivers respectively, coming home P2, P3 in the AM class. And in our last special mention there in terms of podium finishers, Dion Wren, P16 overall, the privateer rounding off the pro podium. But as we look down the finishing positions there, overall, we can see many a driver in the end coming unstuck today, and well, that included David Larson, our last retiring at 25 laps, my apologies, retiring at 5 laps on the finish there, with that absolutely odd instant in the run down towards turn number 1 on the pit wall barrier, ahead of Alex Hill, who retired a lap beforehand for Tiki Simsport. And we had the retirements for Carl McGuirk, 17 laps on the end, Daniel Pays 34 laps on the finish, and also at Darren Fellows, 40 laps of the finish. Chris Edison, 41 laps of the finish. Peter Cox, 42 laps of the finish. And the same for Aaron McGregor there. And what a way for the championship to end for Peter Cox and Aaron McGregor, our runner-up in the pro class and our championship winner in the AM class, both having difficult days under the Florida sun. But as we now come on to our individual class standings, we can start with the elite class here. And we can see Håkon Grebstad taking the win for Ignium Motorsport, again up by 4 tenths over Matthew Chris, with Jacko Taylor rounding off the podium. And it does seem that some sort of post-race penalty has been applied to Daniel Lee, and that's why he's lost out and finishing P3. But the TT Simsport Car Marte driver there, Jacko Taylor, put it on pole, but it wasn't to be his race to win today. 6 seconds off the winners, with Sight Anthony there just missed out on the podium, being passed by Jacko Taylor in the late stages of the race. Sean Valandia battling hard for a P5 for TT Simsport Kimi, ahead of Protect Motorsport's Ryan Moles, with Martin Tillin, Stephen Masters, Daniel Lee and Nathan Foster completing the top 10, and then Alex Hill P11 ahead of Carl McGuirk. And as we look down to the pro class, we can see here that your winner, Nathan Scott, by 8 tenths of a second in the end for Sim Racing Blue over Tiki Simsport Kimi's John Eddowes and Dion Wren completing at the top 3. And the privateer there looking very strong on pace throughout the race, but a major incident cost him Dion what could have been a potential win. David Larson in that late retirement, dropping a P4 towards the end for Civic Esports White, finishing ahead of retirees Darren Fellows from BDM Racing, Chris Edison to UK Sim Racing, and Pete Cox for UK Sim Racing. And as we come onto the AM class, we can see here Michael Warrington for Tiki Simsport Car Marte taking the win by 23.5 seconds over Brock Freight, his Tiki Simsport sister teammate, and then Mark Johnson rounding off the podium there in the AM class for UK Sim Racing. Adrian Kukulis just missed out in the end by 1.5 seconds come the finish line, but P4 all the same ahead of Casper Brotner for Old Dudes in Cars, and then Simon Hartley finishing a lap down for Tiki Simsport Corpa ahead of James Conley, with Jack Bullen 2 laps down come the finish for Tiki Simsport Kimi ahead of his Tiki Simsport Corpa sister teammate Frank Klein. And then Ben Watkinson completed the top 10 in the AM class, the privateer, ahead of Darren Sharples, the last of the on-track finishers in the AM class. And then Old Dudes in Cars, Daniel Pays, P12 there with the retirement, and also Aaron McGregor, the last of our finishers, but we classified as a non-finisher, having retired a couple of laps into the race. But that concludes, of course, our finishing positions, subject to any insurance inquiries, ladies and gentlemen. And now, just before we bring the curtain down for the final conclusion, of course, it is time for us to get ready for our post-round interviews of our drivers. And what a thriller it has been today at the Sebring International Raceway. But the question is, what did our drivers have to make of it? We'll be back in 10 minutes to find out. Don't go anywhere, you won't want to miss it. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back then and ready for our post-round interviews. And as we can see, we've got 4 interviews today. We're going to be hearing from our 2 elite drivers of Håkon Grebstad from Motorsport and Daniel Lee, the privateer. Firstly, before we come on to our pro driver and our pro champion for Season 9 of the GT3 League, and that is John Eddowes and the Tiki Simsport Kimi BMW M4. And then lastly, we'll be hearing from Tiki Simsport Car Marte's AM driver of Michael Warrington, who found himself taking the win in the AM class today. But as we get ready to hear from our drivers, of course, all 4 drivers will have very different perspectives on the racing. And we should point out that with regards to Daniel Lee's demotion down to was P17 overall, that was due to an infringement of racing standards after the checkered flag had finished. So we'll come on to that a little bit later. But firstly, as he joins me now, I have Håkon Grebstad with me in the interview room. Håkon, congratulations on what was an absolutely thrilling season finale today. I mean, it had everything, but in the elite class for yourself, you were put to the ultimate test by Matthew Crisp and Daniel Lee, and you passed that test with flying colours. You must be absolutely exhausted.
Yeah, I'm sweating bullets, mate. I need a shower before I go to bed tonight.
Oh, goodness me. Well, just breaking it down into component parts, of course, going into tonight, you were our elite champion, given your result last time out in Brazil. But, of course, today being one of those ones we want to end the season on a high, was the attitude for today to go all in to take the win, or was it just see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously wanted to win and went hard for that. I didn't really have anything to lose, considering how they've done the drop rounds this season. Considering I won the last endurance race, there was a very little chance for me to actually either lose or gain points tonight. But I'm very glad I did race, because this race was amazing.
Oh, indeed. And let's start off with qualifying, where we did see quite the spectacle, though we didn't talk about it at the time. In qualifying, you qualified P3 overall, with only a 10th separating you from pole position. Of course, Jacko Taylor taking pole, Matthew Crisp putting himself on the front row alongside Taylor, and then you had Daniel Lee alongside. How was qualifying for you?
Oh man, I think I definitely had, I left a bit of time out there, but today was very, very competitive. So actually getting pole would have needed a really, really perfect lap to pull that off.
Well, given the fact you qualified on the second row of the grid, did that change your approach going into the race, or were you going to stick to a particular strategy regardless of where you qualified?
I mean, you're always a little bit on the back foot when you're on not on the front row, but yeah, no, I went pretty much full on attack as soon as I could, and it seemed to work out.
Sorry, after you.
No, I'm all done. Sorry.
That's no problem. All I was going to say is indeed, and we saw that from the start as we look back through some of the racing pictures currently, where from the outset, Jacko Taylor had a great start, but we saw you try to put the move on Crisp into turn 1, and it seemed as though for a good portion of the race, Crisp was always just trying to fall backwards a little bit in this battle between what was eventually the 3 of you, of Crisp, yourself, and Lee. Were you thinking at any point, okay, could there be a 2-stop on the cards, or was it always a 3-stop for you and the people around you?
I was kind of scared that he would be able to pull it off, but my calculations before the race said that it was pretty much impossible to pull a 2-stopper off. So I just went as hard as I could throughout the whole race. Didn't even consider saving any fuel.
Well, given everybody going for the 3-stopping in, and we saw over the course of the stints how it was sometimes yourself leading, at other points it was Lee leading, and Crisp always seemed to be just 1 step behind or 1 second behind. Just take us through that dynamic, of course. We have 3 pit stops, 4 stints, and there's this constant back and forth between the 3 of you. What goes through your mind at that point? Do you just think, okay, I've committed to my strategy and that's it? Or do you think always, okay, I'm not leading in the group, I need to get into the lead?
Yeah, it was hard to explain, I guess. I wanted to, like, at least be with the leader, but I had a few mistakes throughout the race. And yeah, I did see Crisp's, like, extending his laps further on than what me and Danny did. So I was a little worried that he'd end up coming out in front of us after the last stop, and he almost did. I mean, it was half a second behind us when he came out the last time.
Oh, most definitely. And focusing on that final stint or the 20-minute run to the end, we saw you batting hard with Daniel Lee, with Crisp right behind, and for some time you were stuck behind the Ferrari of Lee until a moment at Sunset Bend saw Lee go sideways. But just take us through that dynamic firstly of trying to chase down the Ferrari that's always seemed to be the strategic car over the course of the races.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I had a few mistakes that cost me a little bit of time. Like, I had the first one, I think I lost I lost a 3 second lead, and then I was about 4 seconds behind, I think, after I recovered. I was pretty lucky to not get any damage off of it. Basically, just a moment of loss of concentration. Looked down at my relative mid corner, and then all of a sudden the rear went. So, a little fortunate to be able to get it back on the road and going straight again.
Well, goodness me. Well, we don't normally see mistakes from yourself. And also, would you say that the change in road surface at Sebring was a contributing factor? Because this circuit very rough on car and machine.
Yeah, I mean it's very abrasive and a little slippery. So tires weren't that great throughout the race. Like I didn't have too much wear, but I could definitely feel the wear slowing me down a little bit halfway through the stint. So I ended up taking tires the first two, and then on the short third stint, I double stinted the tires.
Well, indeed, fair play on that, and also going for the safe approach with regards to those early tyres. And of course, with Daniel Lee making that error in the end that cost him the run for the win and put him into P3, it then came down to yourself versus Chris for the final 10 minutes. And what I've got to say is probably one of the best, if not the best battle we've seen all season. It had to be in the season finale, of course. But just take us through, of course, you beat off the Ferrari that made a mistake in the end, but Crisp is right behind. You two have had some moments together. Indeed, Nürburgring may still be a little bit fresh in your mind, and then you're charging all the way down to turn 7 and Crisp just sends it up the inside.
Yeah, he did send it into the hairpin. I was a little worried that he wasn't going to be able to hold the inside there. Thankfully, he did, um, and I was able to pull away again around the outside. Yeah, uh, shame about Danny losing it in Sunset, but that's just how it goes. Especially for a long race like this, it's pretty hard to not have a mistake. And yeah, it's a shame he had one right at the end.
Well, indeed, it was a shame, but of course, one driver's loss is another's gain, and fending off Crisp all the way to line on that final lap, you seem to have got the measure of him. And I have to ask, when you came through Sunset Bend that final time to see the checker flag, how were you feeling as you crossed the line?
Well, relief that I didn't, make any big mistakes, giving him a good run on me down one of the straights or anything. So, yeah, I was sweating bullets the last 2 or 3 laps, really.
Absolutely fantastic to hear. And reflecting on your championship campaign, of course, it's been a superb run all season for yourself. We saw the early rivalry with Daniel Thomas, and once you really found your momentum, there was no sign of you slowing down, with those dominant results at Monza and Bathurst really staying in memory, and also the strategic masterclass of Magny Core. But when you reflect on this campaign yourself, is there one particular moment that stands out as your highlight or your favourite moment from this season?
I mean, probably, two stinting Magny Core. That was or two stopping Magny Core. That was kind of fun, pulling that off and surprising everyone. Um, yeah, but it's a shame in terms of the championship. It's a shame Daniel Thomas didn't show up for a lot of the rounds. Like Interlagos, if he would have been around there and beat me, then I think tonight would have been a struggle to improve, and he probably would have taken the championship, I think.
Oh, indeed. When it didn't quite go down to the wire as perhaps we anticipated, but still, every round matters. You delivered in the rounds that mattered most. And looking ahead to future racing, of course, we have season 10 on the horizon in a couple of weeks' time. Can we see you back on the circuit for that season?
I imagine so. I'll have to look at my schedule and see if I can fit it in, but I'm sure I can.
Oh, it'd be brilliant if you were able to join us. And of course, we'd love to see you flying the flag for Ignium Motorsport again. And I have to ask, how was the reaction when it was announced you were elite champion last time out down in the Ignium garage?
Yeah, I got, plenty of congratulations and stuff. It was a good time.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant to hear. Well, Håkon, just before we do let you go, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to or a thank you to live on this evening's broadcast?
Yeah, just a shout out to the Ignian boys. They weren't around for the latter part of the season, but I'll see if I can't convince them to come back next season and race with me. And yeah, shout out to everyone watching.
Oh, well, I'm sure they'll appreciate the mention. We would love to see them back on circuit with you in Season 10. But with that, Håkon, allow me to say once again, congratulations on being our elite champion for Season 9 of the UKSimRacing GT3 League. A superb campaign all the way through, and really a race today showing why you are our champion from start to finish. And well, if we do see you return in Season 10, we look forward to you defending your crown. But until then, thank you for joining me in the interview room, and congratulations.
Thanks a lot. See you around.
All the best. So hearing there from Håkon Grebstad, our elite champion for Season 9 in the elite class. And well, the Ignian Motorsport driver there having a fantastic way to wrap up the day with a win, despite qualifying being ever tight and this race really coming down to fine margins. In his own words, a couple of mistakes cost him dear at certain points, but indeed it came down to mistakes being the difference in his battle with Daniel Lee, and then in the battle with Matthew Crisp, it all came down to holding his nerve to the very end, and he managed to do so, and that's what enabled him to pick up the final win of the season. Of course, we'd love to have seen the battle with Daniel Thomas go down to the wire, but that's the way it went this season. But you never know, we could see that rivalry reignite in Season 10. But now, as we come on to our next interview of the evening, ladies and gentlemen, we go from one elite driver to another elite driver. And joining me now in the interview room is none other than Daniel, or Danny Lee as he likes to be known, the privateer in the elite class. Danny, we've updated our standings to say that you finished at P3 overall, because I think it's a reflection of your brilliant drive today, and perhaps that demotion to P17 due to your hijinks after you crossed the finish line didn't deserve to see you drop down the order, so we're going to call you our podium finisher for the time being. But of course, more importantly, heartbreak at the end of today's race. It must be tough.
Yeah, that was a tough one to swallow. I got to be honest with you. What a journey, though. I mean, I couldn't have imagined that I would find myself so close behind Håkon, clawing back the temps from him as time went on. I thought to myself, we've really got a race on here. This is a track I love, and it's an enduro. I'm looking after my tyres. Everything, all the ingredients are there for a really, really good battle to commence here. And then Håkon loses it after the pits. I'm not sure whether it's cold tyres that are to do with that because they were awful. But man, you could not tell who was going to win until the very, very end. And I mean the very end. 5 minutes from the end to have just such a silly little spin and just changing everything. And even then, after that, Matty Crisp just come out of nowhere with his incredible strategy. Right on Håkon's tail, I thought, I've got to get a move on here, because even though there's only a couple of laps left, there could still be some action here. He might send it, he might lunge. Håkon, Matty might have come together and given me a final chance at the win, but it wasn't to be. So super gutted. It felt in control until it didn't, and I'm just such a fun race. I'm so glad that I just turned up today and had a brilliant race.
Oh, indeed. And it all started off on a fantastic note. Qualifying in the end, taking P4 on the grid, joining the second row alongside Håkon Grebstad. We saw the top three separated by what was just shy of 900ths in the end. But yourself not too far off of the pole sitter's pace as well. Was qualifying what you expected it to be, or was there a bit more out there, do you feel?
Qualifying was pretty good. There was only a couple of attempts more to be had. Lap 1 and 2 were fine. Lap 3 scuffed it a bit, so saved it all for lap 4. But unfortunately, turn 1 just got a little bit too loose, being a bit too aggressive, trying to get the absolute most out of a lap time. So there was a little bit more to be had, but I doubt it would have influenced the results in the end, because as you saw, they started to peel away. Matty Crisp's early pace led him to be attacked by me. I think it was the wiggle into turn 1 that I did behind him that sort of put him off a bit, if I'm remembering it correctly. And then Jacko had an incident or lost it on the Forest Elbow, I think, that comes onto the back straight. So then it was just me and Håkon, and I expected him to creep away but it wasn't to be. Yeah, but I think we finally, after a season of just being so far apart, we had a race where we could actually spend time on track with one another and have a good battle.
Oh, indeed, and what a battle it was, because as we went into the race, we saw early on what was teeing up to be perhaps the battle of the season in the elite class. And just talking about your strategy, we've seen you, of course, be the man with the master plan at Ferrari, albeit unlike the F1 team, alluding to recent years at Formula One. But focusing on your approach there, what was your focus in terms of, were you trying to go all out, or was it play that conservative, balance the fuel versus the tyre degradation? Just take us through it.
There was no fuel map flexibility in the strategy. I think Matty Chris would disagree because he obviously made something work, but there was absolutely no chance of it being a two-stop. So a three-stop was committed. And once you're sort of out in front, as I sort of spent a long time out in front in the middle stint, once you're in that position, you don't feel like you need to save. You don't feel like you need to be clever and try and leapfrog. All you need to do is manage the gap, and that's about it. So looking after the tyres was important, because the last stint of tyres would be the longest one. So they needed to really be looked after until the end. So not quite as crafty as Magny Core. It was more of a straight shot. So the clever stuff was left to Matty Crisp on this occasion. He came out of nowhere at the very end. So yeah, he might be one to tap up for some information on what exactly he did there.
Or indeed, an eclectic mix of strategies, and yourself finding yourself in that position of really having to push hard and not having any wiggle room to manoeuvre. And we saw that throughout all of the stints coming up to the final stint, where at certain points it came down really to individual mistakes, and even the most minor of errors really separating who would be leading the race versus who would be trailing. And I have to ask, when we saw that Grebstad had made a mistake that dropped him quite a way down and gave you what was a 4-second advantage, at that point, well, having a second advantage over Grebstad, you have to bite somebody's arm off for, but having 4 seconds, were you thinking at that point, okay, this is happening right now, I've just got to keep maintaining the pace and keep calm?
Yeah, 100%. I thought that was it. It looked as though Håkon's car was too much of a handful to manage. Mine felt great in comparison. For most of that race, it felt like floating. It was brilliant. Really, really easy to handle. Tyres were in great nick. Everything was just going my way. And for him to have that tiny little wiggle and end up 4 seconds back from me, about 2/3 into the race with other people in tow, it really felt like that was it then, the nail in the coffin on Håkon's challenge. And I just had to look forward and put it all together. But I don't know what happened exactly. I can't even remember what led to that gap closing again. I think it was just a bad pit stop. The Ferrari isn't very good on the pits. I find that it tends to scurry its tyres when it tries to leave the pit box. It's just not very good at launching from that. So I think that's where all the time was lost in the pit stops. And Håkon agrees, he gained time in the pits on me every time. So you can never take it for granted. And that just showed it right there. Once we left the pits for the last stint, he was right on my tail, in the tow, with a rapid McLaren that seemingly just had a couple of attempts on me. So I couldn't look away from the screen for a second.
Oh, indeed, and we did see over the course of the pit stops, to agree with your point there, we saw you lose an average of about 2 seconds in the pits versus Grebstad. But of course, in that final stint, leading the way with the pressure building, Matthew Chris comes out behind a couple of laps later, but you looked as though you were in control of the battle for a good amount of time. The Ferrari straight line speed really boding well, and also you've been no slouch through the corners.
Yeah, the very last stint was a weird one in terms of psychology, because Matty Chris comes out of nowhere. Normally you'd think, oh no, there's 2 cars after me now. But in actual fact, the first victim that Matty's going to be going for is Håkon. So I thought, enemy of my enemy is my friend. If Matty starts fighting Håkon, that's going to give me some breathing room. But it simply never came to pass, at least not on that occasion. And you can use people that are sort of 1 car behind your opponent behind you. You can use them to sort of snap at the heels of the person that's snapping at your heels. But the gap just stayed at a second between Håkon and Matty. So I didn't have the advantage of that. That sort of felt like the last lifeline, on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. That was my last sort of little saving grace. Without Matty to really give Håkon any trouble, he was free to attack me. And I think that, much like Håkon before, the pressure just kind of got to me. It induced a tiny, tiny mistake on the Sunset Bend that I've done 40 times before without issue. It felt very, very planted. On that one occasion, it just decided to throw something weird at me, and that was it. Gutted. It just fell out. It fell through my hands like sand.
Well, Dean, it was unfortunate at snow, but still you caught the car well and ended up recovering it back into P3. And whilst Jacko Taylor was quite close behind, he never seemed to be able to mount a challenge, but still crossing the line P3 with your efforts today. On reflection, I was about to wait and see how the stewards determine what happened after the race with being demoted places, but still, I think it was more than enough for you to finish P3 in the elite standings when all was said and done. So when you think about your championship as a whole, a positive championship?
It's been brilliant. The quality of the racing and driving has been top notch. That's what we really turn up for. You know, you're going to finish where you're going to finish, but if you have a good time doing it, that's what really matters. And I can honestly say that so far, I've done a few leagues now. This has been the one that's given me that perfect blend of competition, clean racing, good community. So top marks all round for that. And I may or may not be back. It depends on what my timings are. But it won't be for lack of wanting to. I've had a great time throughout the season, and yeah, if you could have a season like that every single time, you'd have no reason to stop.
Well, we really do appreciate the feedback there from yourself, and glad to hear you've enjoyed it that much, and hopefully you'll be back for season 10 if your schedule does allow, but if not, we'll definitely miss you out of the circuit. And well, Danny, of course, bringing your interview to a close, just before I do let you go, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to or a thank you to come at the end of the season?
Just a shout out to everybody on the grid for providing that lovely clean racing we want to turn up for. Yourself for the broadcast, do such a good job of it, and the UKSimRacing community for organising it in the first place. Everything was brilliant, so thank you very much for having us.
Well, Danny, it has been a pleasure all the way through. Congratulations on your third place today, cementing your third place finish in the Elite Championship. And, well, we hope to see you cross paths at UKSimRacing in the near future. But until then, we wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Take care. To hearing there from Daniel Lee, or Danny Lee as he's also known, the elite driver today, really showing that the Ferrari had the pace and also the strategic nuance at his command to have an opportunity to take the win and fine margins all the way. Drivers making mistakes left, right and centre. It was an early mistake for Håkon Grebstad that saw Daniel Lee take the lead with both arms open, and in the final stint the pressure from Grebstad and Crisp really turned up to 11, albeit Crisp holding back, Grebstad right on Lee's heels, and then a small error under braking into Sunset Bend was the difference between Lee picking up the win and ended up in third place. But still, nothing can be taken away from the Ferrari driver's solid performances all season. He really has been the underdog in every race, I would argue, and that's not to besmirch his reputation. He has been the one driver to watch out for. He's been able to pull surprises left, right and centre. The only race he wasn't able to was last time in Brazil, when it just did not work out the setup of the car. But if he is to return in season 10, I can tell you one thing, he will be one driver to watch once again in the elite class, because you cannot rule him out of being in contention for the podium as a minimum, if not the win race in, race out. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that now brings us on to our third interview of today. And we're going to be hearing very shortly from John Eddowes, our Tiki SimSport Kimi Pro driver and champion, with the result from today. And as he gets ready to join us in the interview room, it'll be interesting to hear his perspective on the early race incident, but also on his rivalry with Peter Cox throughout the championship campaign. As we just get ready for John to join us now, of course, the choice of the BMW M4 really boding well throughout the season for our driver, and will today in the end bringing him home in P2, which was an improvement on his overall results. He's gained no further points, but also we saw from the outset how things were evolving. But as he joins me now, John, firstly, allow me to say congratulations on becoming our pro champion for Season 9 of the UKSR GT3 League. You must be over the moon with taking the crown, albeit perhaps not the way you expected, but still, sometimes that's the way the dice roll in racing.
Yeah, that does sound good. No, not the way I'd wanted to win it. I wanted to have a nice little battle with Peter, but you win what you can when you can.
Oh, indeed. And, well, it was going to be a day always about having to stay one step ahead of Peter. And we saw from the outset that it wasn't going Peter's way. He needed to either win today or to finish second and pick up both bonus points to be able to take that crown off of yourself. But in qualifying, it looked close. And we saw it was Nathan Scott in the end who ended up at the head of the field. Just take us through qualifying from your perspective, because it looked as though there, both of you really having difficulty in finding that pole lap time.
Yeah, I had a bit of a scruffy first lap and then thought I had a great turn in for T1 for the second lap, but ran it wide and got an X. And then just not the best 2 laps after that, but was starting alongside Peter, which was basically all that mattered to me. But then noticed that Nathan had beaten us both. So that was almost a weight off the shoulders, because all I had to do was make sure I stuck with Peter. Kept him away from Nathan, really. We had plenty of tiki cars around to make life easier for me.
Oh, indeed, and we saw from the outset how at the start of the race, both of you going side by side into turn 1, you holding the inside line and defending well, and then started to make a little bit of progress with your tiki colleagues around you there. And just with that opening stage, before the incident occurred, was the strategy always going to be mimic Peter, I do what he does, but perhaps a lap earlier or a lap later? Just take us through how you plan to come into the race.
Strategy-wise, if I was behind him, it would have just been save more fuel than him and have a shorter pit stop. But I always had a tyre strategy in mind. We'd been working on that in the week. In terms of what Peter didn't really matter after Nathan out-qualified both of us. It was just stay at least within striking distance of Peter so I could try if I needed to.
Oh, indeed. And then, of course, we had the instant which pretty much decided it all in the opening half an hour of the race. A charge down the Allman Straight, and then a little bit of contact with Aaron McGregor, and Peter just happened to come into the scene at the instant in the right place at the wrong time.
Yeah, it was unfortunate to see that. Just unlucky for Peter. We watched it back. Looks like it must have put his front right out, and he was done from there. It's a shame. It would have been nice to have a proper fight. The way that the season had been going, we'd been so close all season, every race, and then qualify within, what was it, 500ths of each other. It would have been nice to see it out to the end, but you know, on to the next one. I'm sure he'll be back next season.
Oh, indeed, a very close rivalry between the two of you. We'll come on to the wider championship shortly, but after that incident, of course, and the pressure being off to a degree, we saw you drop to the back of the pro field and then start building your way back up through it, chasing it down, Nathan, all the way to the finish there. Just take us through, of course, racing around Sebring for 90 minutes. It looked absolutely taxing on everyone, yourself included.
Yeah, I was pushing quite a lot because there was no pressure, so I could just run the car as fast as I felt I could. Me and Stephen Masters had a little bit of a miscommunication, which meant I had loads of clean track and plenty of opportunity to push. The strategy was always take left tyres at the first stop, take all 4 at the second, and then left tyres again at the third. It looked like Nathan basically didn't take tyres. I never saw him go up on the jack. So I always felt like I had a tyre advantage, but I just couldn't quite close the gap down enough to pounce at the end, but it wasn't too far off.
Well, it's still a smart and sensible strategy all the way through it, and thank you for clarifying with regards to that incident between yourself and Stephen Masters there. And I just see a note from him as well saying that it was a different set of lines and a bit of miscommunication, rather than we thought he'd broken into the side of you into turn number 7, but that wasn't quite the case. But looking more towards now the end of the race, of course, we saw you chasing down Nathan Scott, but not quite able to make it. But of course, coming through that final corner, the checkered flag beckons for you to finish P2 in class, P11 overall, and with it seal the crown on what has been a tough season. Just take us through that feeling as you came to the final checkered flag.
It was more relief than anything else. It's I've never really been in a position to win a title like this before. I've been putting myself under probably more pressure than I needed to, putting laps in. I would say the biggest moment of overwhelming joy was the pole lap at Bathurst, but this was more relief than more relief than being ecstatic or anything like that. It was kind of a letdown from the start with Peter, to be honest, but is what it is.
Oh, indeed. And coming on to your wider championship, of course, when you look back on this championship, the pole lap at Bathurst stands out, but are there any other major highlights in your rivalry with Peter Cox? Because we saw early on in the season, you two didn't really emerge onto the scene. Yep, you both picked up good results, but of course your win at Magny-Cours really put you up there in terms of championship campaign, and Peter's subsequent win as well, but it was all wide open and then it all came down just to the two of you. But what moment stood out the most to you?
Well, that win at Magny was another one that was down to Peter was winning, and I think he had a bit of a tangle with a lap car, which gave me the win. But from then on, I kind of felt like Peter was faster, but I was occasionally doing better on strategy. But it really turned around at Bathurst when I got the pole. I felt okay, I can beat him on pace, and I can challenge him on strategy as well. So then it was just a straight fight and loads of fun. Interlagos was a blast. We had a great little battle. There was a couple of good moves at Interlagos. Me and Jacko, I think I forget who we were fighting, but that was a good fight when we went 3 wide around turn 5. There's been loads of good races. It's just been great having loads of Tiki cars in this great league.
Oh, indeed. It's been great to see the Tiki Army all racing strong and placing well throughout the season. And, of course, looking to Tiki SimSport Kimi in particular, the team you've been racing for. In the end, you finished joint P2 in the team stands alongside ProTech Motorsport, missing out on the top step to UKSimRacing by 16 points, but still finishing P2. All things said and done, no small achievement. What's the mood been like down in the team garage?
Oh, it's been a laugh. There's 15 of us, but there's a few of them in the garage in the factory who sit and watch the races, and then afterwards they pull us aside and take the mick out of us for all the stupid mistakes we've made in the race. And we have a good laugh. We work on setups together, and it's been loads of fun. It's been loads of fun. Not too serious, but plenty of fun.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear. And what I do have to, of course, ask the question, with Season 9 now its conclusion, can we expect you as reigning champion to be coming back for Season 10 to defend your crown?
Yes, I would like to. Unfortunately, being reigning champion probably means I won't be in pro anymore, but yeah, I'll be back.
Oh, we look forward to seeing you on the grid, John. But with that in mind, just before we do let you go, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
Yeah, man. Thanks to Si for putting on a great league. Thanks to you for smashing it with the broadcast every week. It's always great to have a Monday morning coffee and watch it back. And thanks to the Tiki SimSport factory. Greg and Stephen built me a great car this weekend, and everyone else who's entered with Tiki, new and old, it's been a great laugh.
Well, John, it's been a pleasure to have you in the interview room for the first time this season, and allow me to once again say congratulations on being our pro champion for Season 9 of the GT3 League hosted by UKSimRacing. We look forward to you coming back in Season 10 to potentially defend your crown, but until then, well done and have a brilliant evening.
Thanks, mate. Let me say thanks to Peter as well for some great battling. I hope to see him out there next season.
I'm sure Peter will hear that, and I think right now, whilst he will be a little bit downbeat, he will still be smiling knowing that you've enjoyed the battling with him. We hope to see you two fighting hard again next season.
Yes, sir. See you then.
All the best. So hearing there from John Eddowes, our pro champion from Tiki SimSport Kimi, and well, what a campaign it has been. Really the belief coming alive after the win at Magny-Cours in round number 4. And of course, Peter Cox responded 2 weeks later with the season break at the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit with the win. And it went down to the wire between the two of them. But today, of course, it didn't play out the way anybody expected it to, with that major incident early on between Eddowes and McGregor, then spiralling to also pick up Peter Cox along the way, and Cox with the damage having to retire. Eddowes been able to continue on, but still, that's the way it goes in motorsport sometimes, and sometimes we can be deprived of the drama we expect in terms of the battle on circuit to see championships ending with other drama instead. But still, it should not take away from the fact we've had a pro championship to remember through the ages, and we look forward to seeing Eddowes come back to defend his title in Season 10 if he's still in the pro class or he's been promoted, really try to put a foothold in the upper classes of the league. But congratulations to a deserved champion and a fight to P2 today after what looked to be a tough qualifying session. And really, perhaps the way both our championship contenders being overshadowed a little bit by Nathan Scott's brilliant performance to take the class win. But coming up from our third interview then, ladies and gentlemen, we now come to our final interview of today, and that is none other than Michael Warrington, who, as he gets ready to join me very shortly, it'll be interesting to hear his perspective. It's been some time since we've seen him on the top step, but indeed a return to the top step at the very end has done him very well. Indeed, it'll be interesting to hear his perspective on a race to remember, and indeed perhaps a dramatic start which saw him jump up the order. But as he joins me now, Michael, what a way to end your championship campaign. Of course, we've seen you battling for wins in the past in the AM class, but in the last couple of rounds, perhaps not been right up there compared to our champion Aaron McGregor. And then tonight, through interesting circumstances, right back up there fighting hard and delivering on strategy. It must have been a bit of a roller coaster on circuit today.
It really was. It was definitely a race of, for me, it was a race of survival. It was how I was approaching it. It's, I didn't feel like I had the pace going into it. But yeah, survival played out in the end. I think is the only way I can word that one.
Oh, indeed, survival all the way through. And of course, we know that's a big factor in any racing, whether it's sprint racing or endurance racing. And let's just dial it back to, of course, qualifying. Now, we saw in qualifying, looked tough out there. You end up qualifying P23 overall, P6 in class. How was qualifying from your perspective? Because we typically seen you qualifying inside the top 5, but was it quite there today, the pace? Or did you feel as though there was a lot of time still on the circuit?
There was definitely a little bit of time on the circuit. Definitely sort of end of practice going into qualifying. I had a little bit more pace than what I showed in qualifying, but yeah, just couldn't put a full lap together in qualifying. But still, I was weirdly happy with my qualifying compared to where I was in practice. So it was still a step in the right direction, and then but yeah, not quite where I'd like to have been come the start of the race.
And then translating into the start of the race, of course, starting quite a way back. We didn't see any major instance on the opening at 5 corners, and Sebring very tight for the opening corners, so well done to everyone for making it through it safely and sound. But as the race went on, we saw in the opening 20 minutes a number of drivers started to fall and you started to rise up the order. What was your approach to the opening stint? Were you thinking, not just play it safe, see how it evolves, or I need to make as much ground as possible? Just take us through that dynamic.
It was the opening laps were very much survival. Just knowing it was going to be a tight bunch, a tight pack. I didn't want to. I'd had a few unfortunate races leading up to this. I wanted to try and keep it clean, try and make sure I was giving myself the best opportunity. And then I think it was towards the end of the stint. There was a spin in front of me, sort of mid-stint, and Adrian got in front of me, and I basically was following him all the way to the end of the stint. I actually changed my strategy and pitted a lap early to try and undercut him, which was actually successful. So, but yeah, most of it to begin with was just survival.
Oh, indeed, and survival being such a key factor. And speaking of drivers who perhaps did not survive those opening instances, we saw a championship winner and also with the leader of the class, Aaron McGregor, involved in that early instant with John Eddowes and Peter Cox. We also saw a couple of other big names in the AM class falling by the wayside early on. To name a few, Darren Sharple was perhaps the biggest shock and surprise. And as you continue to make your way through and up into the lead of the AM class, was it becoming a bit of a reality check in terms of, you know, I'm actually leading right now? It's a 10-second gap and it's growing.
Definitely, I didn't expect to gap Adrian like I did after the pit. So I was glad to get ahead. I decided not to take tyres at the first stop to make sure I had warm tyres, just so I knew I could just push that little bit more coming out on my outlap. So it definitely played into it, but I expected sort of a tight battle there. I did not expect to keep seeing the times behind me keep just growing and growing and growing. That was a big shock.
Oh, indeed, and as the shock of the time continued to grow, we saw in the remainder of the race the big question of strategy, 2-stop or 3-stop. It looked as though you committed quite early to a 3-stop strategy. Was that always the plan, to push quite aggressively on the strategy?
Yeah. Any attempt at fuel saving from my side had not been successful leading up. It was it was just basically push from start to finish, and just pit as and when I was needed. It was, but yeah, so yeah, there was. It was always a plan to 3-stop this race.
Well, indeed, and with the strategy successfully executed, coming to the final corner with an advantage that only continued to grow, the checker flag awaited you, and it's a checker flag that you haven't seen as the winner in class since Monza back in round number 3. It must have been a fantastic feeling at the finish line. It definitely was. It was I will say that last lap, I had Bathurst going through my head, where I clipped the inside of Forest Elbow and broke my steering for sitting 4th in class, and just my heart sank at that moment at Bathurst. So all I kept thinking through that last lap was, "Don't do a Bathurst, don't do a Bathurst." So yeah, surviving and seeing the checking flag, I was absolutely over the moon. Indeed, there was no heartbreak this time around, only joy and celebration. And of course, with the result today, 41 points accrued, means that, as we talked about before the broadcast really got underway, you were the outsider in terms of the hunt for P2 today in the AM Championship, and I'm pleased to tell you that you have secured P2 against the odds. And indeed, if anybody was a betting man, you've probably just cashed in your chips really well, because you managed to come P2 in the end by 3 points over Casper Brotner in a championship campaign that has seen everybody have swings and roundabouts of momentum. But for yourself, how does that make you feel finishing at P2?
Oh, I'm elated. Coming into this, I knew there was a backdoor chance, but I thought it was very much a backdoor chance. I was not expecting to sort of get P2 at the end of this race. So I'm over the moon with that result. Yeah, Aaron throughout the whole season had proved just that little bit too quick and elusive for most of us. So congratulations to him on the championship. But yeah, getting P2, I'm absolutely elated.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. And when you look back on the championship, are there any moments that stand out in particular, or any highlights in mind?
Today is definitely a highlight, just in terms of the complete race. Monza is the other one. I know I'm naming the 2 wins, but Monza I had pace I didn't know I had. I was up there in the dizzy heights with the elites for a short period of time before dropping back. So it was definitely knowing I had that pace in me was a shock, and definitely pleased to see. In other than that, it's just been a good season. Okay, I've had my fails and things haven't gone well, but it's been an enjoyable season to be part of, and it's just been great stuff all round, really.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. And I do have to ask, of course, with it being such a strong season for yourself, will you be coming back for season 10?
I'd love to. I've just got. I was talking to John in the waiting room before before I came in, and I have quite a lot of commitments when it comes to spring and summer, so I don't know whether I'm going to be able to make it work. But I would love to be coming back in season 10, but I just don't know as yet. But if it's not season 10, it will definitely be another season down the line, because I have had an absolutely amazing time.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear. And whether it's season 10 or a later season, we'll happily welcome you with open arms, because it's been a joy to see out of the circuit time and time again, Michael. But just before we do let you go, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
Thank you to yourself for the broadcast. As always, every week has been absolutely phenomenal. And a thank you to Sai for running the league, because it's been a fantastic league, and a thank you to everybody that's took part as well. It's been great to be a part of. It's been some great racing. It's been lovely. And the last shout out has to go to the Tiki guys. I think I mentioned in an earlier interview, I joined very late before the start of the season. They've welcomed me in immensely, and it's just been the cherry on the cake being part of that team amongst this season as well. It's been absolutely lovely. So thank you to John and everyone at Tiki for putting up with me for a season, and all the laughs that have gone with that.
Well, it sounds such a good mood down in the garage, and indeed I think it's been reflected in the results you brought together. But with that, Michael, congratulations on being the runner-up in the AM Championship for Season 9 of the UKSimRacing GT3 League, and congratulations on ending your campaign on the ultimate high of a win at Sebring International Raceway. Thank you for joining me in the interview room.
Thank you very much, Paul. Cheers. Take care.
All the best. So here and there from our final interview of today, Michael Warrington, the AM winner and runner-up in the AM Championship for Tiki SimSport Car Marte. An interesting qualifying session where we got to see throughout the qualifying session things not really coming together for Michael, indeed a number of his peers, but then again, as he said himself, just about survival on that opening stint, and we saw so many major contenders in the AM class today fall, and well, like we said at the start of the broadcast, in the AM class, Warrington had a chance to win the battle for P2, but it was a huge outside chance, and in the end, just keeping his head down, steering clear of the danger, he came on through to take P2 in the class. It just goes to show you, it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish, and he delivered it out of the park. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our fourth and final interview for today. And you've heard from our 4 drivers today of Håkon Grebstad, the elite winner and elite champion for Season 9 from Ignium Motorsport firstly. And then we heard from a fellow elite driver and third place finisher overall in the championship standings. And third place today, of course, on the circuit, Daniel Lee. Before you heard from our pro champion from Tiki SimSport Kimi of John Eddowes. And then lastly, we just heard from Tiki SimSport Car Marte's Michael Warrington, your runner-up in the AM class and class winner for today's race. But of course, now we need to give you an update on the championship standings. These will be subject to stewards' inquiries, but we can bring up the standings on screen. We start off with the elite class, and we can see here, these will be the final standings subject to any stewards' decisions. Håkon Grebstad, your winner today, only improving by his total tally by a single point, now to 130, because technically improved by a single point over his result at Magny-Cours, with 1 drop round per sprint and 1 drop round per endurance race. And Daniel Thomas, the runner up there, on 112 points. Unfortunate the ProTech Motorsport driver wasn't able to attend last time out and really sealing the deal with regards to the championship campaign for the Ignium Motorsport driver Håkon Grebstad, but it just goes to show you those early results really delivered for Grebstad and therefore gave him the ultimate result in the end. Joe Newman and Daniel Lee, they're both on 88 points. I think there is a little bit of a question mark about what happened post-race to lead to Daniel Lee being demoted down the elite finishing positions. That may be looked at, but at the moment they're both classified as P3 finishers there. Congratulations to the pair, the privateer of Lee and the SimRacing Red driver of Newman. And then we can see Matthew Crisp, despite his difficulties early on in the season, really coming alive in the second half of the season and delivering with what was a 5th place finish in the end on 79 points. 12 clear of the pair of Cy Anthony and Jacko Taylor, who really today sparred hard with one another. And we saw that in the last couple of rounds of the season. We, of course, saw that back in what was Interlagos as well. And the drivers there, P6, P7 respectively, ahead of Ryan Moles from ProTech Motorsport. And then Sean Valandia and Martin Tilley from Tiki SimSport Kimi and Tiki SimSport Coppa completed the top 10. Best of the rest, Dean Powell there, the privateer fishing at P11, not in attendance today, and what was a good set of performances in the midpoints of the season, doing him well, ahead of Nathan Foster for Simran Racing Blue, with Sam Congreve, Josh Fletcher and Damien Lobbett completed the run to P15. Stephen Masters P16 there, having a difficult day today, and indeed over the majority of the rounds this season, not just working out in his favour for Tiki SimSport Toa's driver, but still finishing ahead of Sam Sherwood from ProTech Motorsport, with Joshua Pratt completed ahead of Dan Blackwell and Ryan Davies to take us to the end of the top 20. Outside the top 20, Alexander Hill, Austin William Campbell, Carl and James Folks, and that wraps up your elite standings. And as we come onto the pro class, we can see the confirmation here. John Eddowes, your champion for Tiki SimSport Kimi by 7 points to the end over Peter Cox from UKSimRacing. They come out of this round on the same points totals as they went into it, with neither driver improving their score from round 4. And then Nathan Scott making it a P3 finish in the end for Simran Racing Blue, beating Alex Gaines come the conclusion, with Edward Knight there for Ignium Motorsport Spark completing the top 5. Just holding off David Larson there based on result countback, 77 points apiece, but David Larson definitely on course to potentially take the win today, until that unfortunate incident 20 minutes from the finish on the barrier at the pit wall. And then we saw Dion Wren finishing in P7 in the championship with a great result ahead of Chris Eddersford and Colin Patterson and Darren Fellows completing the top 10 for UK Sim Racing, Tiki Sim Sport and BDM Racing respectively. Best of the rest, Tom Farther in P11 ahead of Jeff Griffiths, with Joel Amos, Paul Smith and Jaco Boschel completing the top 15, and then Stuart Brown, Mark Collicott, Martin Fernie, Daniel Merchant and Ollie Pimley completing your pro standings. We'll then come on to the AM Drivers' Championship. And the confirmation there of Aaron McGregor, your AM Championship winner, of course, crowned last time out, but look to P2, and Michael Warrington in the end, sneaking his way into P2 on 93 points for Tiki Sim Sport Car Marte, 4 points clear, in fact, 3 points clear, we should say, Casper Brotner for Old Dudes and Cars, who did not improve today, and indeed, Warrington defying the odds to bring it on home as the runner-up. Adrian Kukulis not improving, staying P4 on 89 points, 1 point ahead of Mark Johnson, who despite his significant improvement over Magny Core, not able to find a way to jump into the top 3, but still well done for Johnson for trying to make the Mercedes work all season, what looked to be a difficult car. And then Brock Freights completing at P6 there on 86 points, sits clear of Darren Sharples, who just did not have the luck this season. Indeed, every time Sharples was leading, a major incident that was typically not his fault saw him drop out of the winning position and indeed out of the top 5 in class. Eden Frazina there, P8 ahead of James Conley, with Simon Hartley complete in the top 10 for Tiki Sim Sport Copper. And then Eric Stegen finishing P11 best of the rest ahead of BDM Racers Matt Maddox, with Old Dudes and Cars is Daniel Pace P13, Thomas Barjuk and Ben Watkinson to P15, with Jack Bullen, Frank Klein, Adrian Garcia, Ryan Gonzalez and Richard Curie completing the AM Championship standings. But lastly, of course, we must come on to our Teams Championship standings, and we can see here that after 8 rounds, UK Sim Racing provisionally crowned champions on 201 points to Tiki Sim Sport Kimmy's and ProTech Motorsports 185 points apiece. It was close, but in the end, UK Sim Racing putting together that consistent set of results that boded well for them. But Tiki Sim Sport Kimmy jumping up into P2 right at the end alongside ProTech Motorsport, with Tiki Sim Sport Car Marte P4 there and not too far off the pace. A sizable gap of what was 29 points to Eden Motorsport, with Håkon Grebstad delivering at the very end there to pick up some key points, but also teammates throughout the season also putting it together, staying in the top 5, with Old Dudes and Cars there fighting to a valiant P6 ahead of Tiki Sim Sport, with Simon Racing Blue and Simon Racing Red only a point apart of the pair of them, P8, P9 and Symphony Esports White battling to P10. Best of the rest, Tiki Sim Sport Corpa P11 on 90 points, 1 ahead of Ignium Motorsport Spark, with BDM Racing at Tiki Sim Sport Tower, Team Zor and Symphony Esports Black completing your team's championship standings. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed this series all the way from the start to the finish and you want to know more about the UK Sim Racing community, perhaps you're sat there right now wondering how you can get involved in future instances of our leagues. Alternatively, perhaps you just wonder if you want to know a little bit more about UK Sim Racing or everything in between, we can always go to our official website, that's uksimracing.co.uk, which you saw flash up earlier in today's broadcast. Alternatively, if you want to follow us on social media, you can go to twitter.com/UKSimRacing_. Also, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, which you're currently tuning in on, why not subscribe today to stay up to date with all of our latest broadcasts? And also at this point, we'd like to say a big thank you to all of our affiliates, including Swelly Omeda Sim Racing Coaching, the creator of the Motor Rating Checklist. Swelly Omeda Sim Racing Coaching can help take your sim racing drive to the next level. Whether you're looking to gain a 10th, improve your approach to the racing line, or develop your consistency, Swelly Omeda has a coaching course to meet your needs. Plus, with Swelly being a multi-time champion of official iRacing series, including the 2021 at PSCC, you know you're receiving coaching from the very best in the industry. Also, we have their Race Anywhere, the provider of curated sim racing equipment aimed to only stock products that represent excellent value for the sim racing community. Also, Demon Tweaks, the provider of the most complete and innovative motorsport product range available worldwide. So no matter what your level of discipline, Demon Tweaks can help drive you to realise your motorsport ambitions. SimLab, the leading manufacturer of high-quality sim racing-related hardware. As a proud partner of Mercedes AMG Petronas Esports, SimLab aims to enhance virtual racing experiences with uncompromising solutions that push the boundaries of esports, and means that they are providing you with the go-to brand for quality sim racing rigs. And lastly, we have Amazon, the company striving to be the Earth's most customer-centric company, the Earth's best employer, and the Earth's safest place to work through the provision of concepts pioneered by Amazon, including but not limited to one-click shopping, Amazon Prime, and Amazon Alexa. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, we now bring the curtain down on Season 9. It makes me sad to say, but don't fret, I'm pleased to say that we are not too far away. In a month's time, we will be back for Season 10, which gets underway on Sunday, the 2nd of April 2023. All the details are to be finalised and confirmed in the near future, but save the date, and what I'm very happy to say on a personal level, I'll be back in the commentary booth to bring you all of your racing action throughout Season 10, and where Season 9 is any gauge to go by, the seasons get better and better, season in, season out, and in the 10th season, I'm sure it's going to be a special one to celebrate an anniversary stone, of course, for the GT3 League, and we will have returning champions, we'll have newcomers and everyone in between, but who'll be setting the pace of the season opener. We'll be back then at the start of April, but until then, we bring the curtain down and say thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. We have been UK Sim Racing. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.